Hello, everybody. Welcome into our Dog Nation postgame show presented by the UGA bookstore. We are live here at Mercedes-Benz Stadium, where obviously disappointment reigns if you're a UGA fan after a humbling loss to the Alabama Crimson Tide that was really dominant for Alabama in all phases. The Alabama offense was explosive today. Bryce Young looked the part of the Heisman Trophy winner. Jamison Williams, the wide receiver, could not be stopped. And the best unit in the country for this season, the Georgia defense, did not look that way against Alabama today. And Georgia offensively could not do enough to keep up with the explosiveness that Alabama brought to the table. Alabama now SEC champions, quite possibly the number one team in the country now, moving in to the college football playoff selection announcement tomorrow. Georgia now puts its hopes in the fate of the selection committee. No reason to believe that Georgia also won't be one of the four teams selected for the college football playoff, but whether it's selected tomorrow or not, obviously what's going to be on the mind of a lot of Georgia fans here tonight is the fact that Georgia did not look the part of an eventual national champion in the way that it played against Alabama. So it's all going to be on the table. I sort of have a feeling I kind of know where some of this is going to go, and I will do my part to read as many of your comments as I can. I'll do my part to let you have as much room as you want to talk about what you saw today. This is obviously a very disappointing night for me personally, of course, and clearly for the Georgia fans who are, tuned in, who obviously have so much emotional investment in what's happening with the team, and it was an incredibly disappointing night. And, almost nothing needs to be said beyond that, and that's probably a good thing because there's really almost nothing that can be said. In addition to that, this night was just terrible almost all the way around. So we will get into the fact that it seemed like the Georgia defense just tried a lot of things to slow down Young, tried a lot of things to get some of those coveted stops, and just really couldn't get a hand on him. That's one of the things I talked about on Dog Nation Daily on Friday was the hope that Georgia might be. If I need to, I had some security folks trying to come through here. Let me help these folks out here. Sorry, folks. And I'll get that back situated here. So sorry about that, everybody. Let me see if I can get back in gear here for a little bit. So I apologize, but we talked about the hope that Georgia could get against Young and find a way to rough him up a little bit, find a way to be physical with him and find out if he wanted to take 60 minutes worth of beating. And like good players do from time to time, tonight Young just wouldn't have any of that. Getting any hand on him at all proved to be a very difficult thing to do. And Jamison Williams, proved to be an incredible weapon for Alabama. If you would have told me that Alabama would have played most of this game without John Mechie and Williams would still prove to be as difficult to stop as he turned out to be, I guess I probably wouldn't have believed that. But that was indeed the case tonight. Georgia just had no answers defensively for what Alabama tried to do. I don't think that's necessarily what you would expect to take place in a rematch, but for now, Georgia can't think about the possibility of a rematch with Alabama. It's got to kind of live with what happened tonight, and what happened tonight was clearly not very good for Georgia there in that regard. On the offensive side of the ball, a lot of attention is going to be paid to the quarterback and Stetson Bennett, as typically happens when it comes to quarterbacks. And tonight, Bennett was not able to direct an offense that was able to match what Alabama tried to bring to the table there. And I think everything should be on the table. I think that, giving JT Daniels another look, I completely agree with the Georgia fans who are going to want to hear more about that. And, I told some of my media brethren before the game was over, going in the press box, knowing I was going to come over here and speak to all of you, that, I do hope Kirby is pressed on this. Not because I think he's hiding something or even necessarily making the wrong decision. I just think that a decision of this magnitude that Smart has made over the course of the year, and tonight, certainly Georgia seemed lacking in comparison to the quarterback spot. A decision of that magnitude deserves a deep and thorough explanation. That extraordinary decisions, extraordinary choices, require extraordinary evidence. And I hope that Smart does speak more about that. I thought it was interesting what Brad Nessler, when he joined us on Dog Nation Daily on Thursday, I thought it was interesting what he had to say about the quarterback situation there. And Daniels' family's belief that Daniels was in line to play more in the Tennessee game. That didn't happen. And that was really the signal there at that time that Bennett was the quarterback that Georgia was going to ride with. Now, listen, I don't think Stetson Bennett's the reason why Georgia lost this game, but certainly Bennett was part of the reason why Georgia couldn't keep pace with Alabama tonight. I do believe that's true. And I think that it's important not to conflate what you do know with what you don't know. What you do know is how Stetson Bennett played. What you don't know is how JT Daniels would have played had he been in there, and it's not obvious that Daniels would have performed better than Stetson Bennett did tonight. But for the Georgia fans who are going to want to have that conversation and ask more questions about Daniels, who would like to hear Kirby Smart speak more about JT Daniels, of course I understand where you're coming from on that, and when we take your comments, that'll be a part of what that discussion is. One more thing, and then we'll go to the comment section here. It's part of our Dog Nation postgame show. We're live here at the Mercedes-Benz Stadium. We're presented by the UGA bookstore. Couple of issues from Kirby Smart tonight. Decisions that he made in the second half of this game are getting some attention. One, I thought Smart made the right decision on, and another, I thought he made a mistake. Second half, when Georgia's down 14, it's a fourth down. Georgia on the third down play had tried the end zone to Bowers, couldn't quite connect on that, and then facing kind of a fourth and long situation, Georgia chose to go for it on fourth down instead of kicking a field goal and potentially cutting the lead to 11. I think that's absolutely the right choice there. I don't think the field goal helps you at all in that situation. I think from that standpoint, field goal basically still requires the same number of scoring plays to tie the game, take the lead, whatever else. So in that particular spot, I don't think a field goal helps you very much. In the situation late in the game, fourth quarter, looking at 4th and 10, Georgia gets the false start, makes it 4th and 15. Kirby takes the offense back off the field and puts the punting team in there at that spot. Honestly, I really don't know what the difference between 5 yards there and that spot is. And for a guy in Smart, who I think has actually been really good with his fourth down decisions for the most part the last couple of years, he's chosen to be more aggressive almost consistently every opportunity he's had a chance to when it comes to that. And tonight I thought was a little bit of a step back in that regard. Who knows why he made the choice that he made, and who knows if he'll even be asked about that in the press conference, which I believe is ongoing, even as I'm speaking to you. But in that particular case, I thought that was a mistake. Not trying the field goal, I saw some folks kind of criticizing and complaining about that. I thought Smart made the right decision there. I don't think a field goal helps you at all. Deciding to punt instead of going for it on 4th and 15. Now listen, the results of a potential 4th and 15 play aren't great either, but from that standpoint, I probably would have gone for it there. So that's kind of the story. We'll roll through here. We'll get a lot of your comments. I'm obviously, very disappointed by all of this tonight, and I don't know. It's just a very, very tough time. It's also a weird thing because at a certain point you got to try to consider, whether, Georgia's obviously still a college football playoff team, and I would say the overwhelming likelihood that it is. But what does that kind of mean in the immediate when you talk about what happened and what went wrong for Georgia tonight? So we'll cover all of that. We'll get some Facebook comments here. I've got light shining my eyes here, so hopefully I can read these tonight. By the way, thanks to the UGA bookstore for making all the show possible. We'll give a shout out to them here in a moment, but let me get into the comments. Mike Anderson says, pathetic game, Stetson Bennett interception, pick 6. Yeah, just all kinds of bad stuff, of course. Joseph Kennedy says, we won't ever beat Alabama as long as Saban's their coach. Just face it. Yeah, that's the one thing I can't do, Joseph. And, I'm obviously going to give room for folks' comments, and I understand the disappointment. Trust me, I get this. I mean, I can promise you there are about 1,000 things I'd rather do right now than come in here and do this Dog Nation postgame show. I can promise you this is not really where I want to be, and I understand the frustration that's in the voices of so many Georgia fans. Like, the one thing I'm not going to do is proclaim never this or whatever else. I'm just not going to do that. No one's in the mood to hear anything, rosy or find the silver lining. I'm not going to try to insult your intelligence by trying to tell you that things are great right now, but I'm also not going to, be sort of dragged down the pathway of nothing ever good's ever going to happen. I'm not going to do that either. And Joseph, listen, I do get the frustration. I understand all of that. More of your comments here on Facebook. J.C. Cole on Facebook on the subject of Bennett locking in on Bowers there a lot, especially in the second half of this game, and I thought that probably was too much. And listen, I'm like most of the rest of you. I think that Brock Bowers right now probably stands as, I've said before that I think he's the most dynamic pass-catching weapon in the Kirby Smart era. I don't think there's any doubt that's true anymore. It seemed like something of a hot take when I first said it, but I don't think there's any question that's true now. This is just a really good, exceptional football player. And obviously he was a real weapon for Georgia in the second half, but it is probably true that Bennett probably keyed on him a bit too much tonight, not really looking for anything other than Brock Bowers. Connor Riley was sitting next to me in the press box. I had to get out of the press box for a little while. I couldn't stand the tension in the quiet press box. I went and sat in the stands for a little bit, came back in the press box before the game was done, and Connor kind of compared it to Kearis Jackson in the 2020 season, where it seemed like Stetson kind of locked in on him maybe too frequently from time to time, and that may be the case there. More of your comments there on Facebook. Darius Swain to say we failed to make defensive adjustments tonight, and maybe that's true. And it also seems that Georgia just tried a lot of stuff tonight. Like, one of the things that Alabama I think is probably pretty good at is they seem to find those mismatches. They seem to spread a bunch of receivers out and exploit mismatches they think they can take advantage of, and that's obviously a really good thing to be able to do. And as I said before, if you would have told me there's no John Mechie tonight, and yet Jamison Williams would still have the success that he would have had, I reckon I don't believe I much would have believed that. But that's indeed the case here. That's the way all of that goes down. So just very impressive night tonight for Alabama. And as far as what I think about the Georgia defense after this, they got torched tonight. They got absolutely just lit on fire tonight. And this will go into that same category of Georgia defense the last couple of years playing good offenses and really getting exploited there. I hate to go through the list here, but last year with both Florida and Alabama, 2019 with LSU, 2018 with Alabama a bit. Obviously, the Oklahoma game in 2017, that for as good as the Georgia defense is, there's a narrative out there that it's only great against less than stellar offenses, that in 2021 a great offense beats a great defense. Now, here's what I still am of the belief of. I am still of the belief that this defense can lead Georgia to a national championship. But I think you saw tonight that you're not going to pitch a shutout against a great offense. And Alabama is a great offense. And any grifter or, charlatan who tried to make you think other than that coming into the game, I guess shame on them. The Alabama offense was and is an explosive, high-powered attack. And so the kind of performance that the Georgia defense has to provide, if it's lucky enough to get a rematch with Alabama, it's going to have to get some key stops. It's not going to come out here and shut Alabama completely down, but it's going to have to get some key stops. And if you want the next time to be better than the last time, that's one of the things that you're going to probably have to be able to do. More of your comments rolling through here. Javon Perry on the subject of Brock Bowers. Yeah, the one thing, if you're trying to find anything positive at all tonight, the Georgia tight ends, Darnell Washington gets his first career touchdown. Brock Bowers obviously doing big things all night long. That's clearly a deep position group. We said going into the game that we thought that the best path for Georgia's success was probably running backs and tight ends. And for the most part, Georgia did a lot of 22 personnel tonight. In some cases, even had 3 tight ends in the game. They obviously wanted as many of those guys in the field as possible. When it comes to tight end position, you kind of see why that is. But unfortunately, not enough going on around that. Cody Taylor critical of the Georgia secondary, and I understand where that comes from. That group got torched tonight. It really did. And, as I said before, if you're Georgia, you're just hoping for that chance to regroup here and figure some things out and just try to play better the next time you play the Alabama, which is not going to be any kind of easy feat whatsoever. It's not going to be an easy feat. But the recipe for championship success in a situation like this is finding a way to get some stops. You're not going to come out here and shut the Alabama offense all the way down. You're just not going to be able to do that. But can you get more stops in a rematch than you got tonight? I would say there's some hope for that, but obviously no one wants to think too much about that just yet. Our buddy Jeff Sentell is going to stop by. Y'all may have to give me a second to reframe things when Jeff comes by, but I believe he's going to be with us here for a little bit. Jeff, why don't you come on over here? We'll get you involved. It's our Dog Nation post-game show. We're presented by the UGA bookstore. If you want to swing around here, and I'll move the camera around just a little bit. We'll be casual tonight. We don't have to pretend this is CBS Evening News because it's not. Jeff, slide on in here. Let's see if we can get you fixed up here just a little bit. I think we're probably good. Just come on in here. We'll slide you in here a little bit. Come on over here a little bit closer. Because if we move back, we're going to lose our light a little bit. But Jeff, we're talking about what goes on there, and just a disappointing night. And we're going to let folks give their comments and say what they want to say here. And I'm not going to try to sugarcoat things too much. I'm not going to try to paint too rosy of a picture here. Just a night when Georgia got absolutely throttled, both sides of the ball, one end of this field to the other, almost from the outset. Just an absolutely miserable evening.
I'm curious, what were your first words? Here we are again. Did you say here we are again another day, or did you just go flash through it?
Yeah, I mean, we just kind of got into it tonight because, I mean, obviously one of the things that's different about this is it's not necessarily the end of Georgia's season, but, man, to have anything that happens beyond this be relevant, Georgia's got to play a lot better than it did this evening.
Yeah, I think, the storylines everybody's going to hear, they're probably already writing them. Redemption, revenge, return to the drawing board. I think the most frustrating thing is that Georgia does not really appear to what we thought they were. Historically great defense. I mean, it was the third quarter and Alabama had 448 yards, high point total. In Georgia, here's what it is. Georgia continues to be the pretty high bar that Alabama clears on its way to greatness. That's just what it is. Georgia is the team that Alabama crushes and establishes its greatness. Bryce Young won the Heisman today. Alabama is now setting itself up. Everybody, I think most of your comments are going to say, where does Georgia go from here? Do they go to the 3? Alabama goes to 1. And I don't want to make this about the obvious personnel issue because I know people are going to have their comments. They're going to have every right to about how does Georgia get more firepower so they score every time or almost every time with Alabama. I think that's the obvious. And I'm not trying to be apolitical. I'm just trying to share a football opinion here. And I think this was the first game and this was probably going to be the game all year long when the talents of Adam Anderson were really missed. And I think of this purely from a football standpoint. I was on the field. I watched the whole game. There were so many times Channing Tindall, Nolan Smith, Devontae Wyatt. I mean, they were a step or two away from Bryce Young. And I think the only way you're going to stop a surgical attack like this with Bryce Young is you got to continually harass him, put pressure on him, force turnovers, because he did a lot of things whatever he wanted to. I think if I see another version of Alabama scheming up somebody on a screen in space where they're catching a slant route, it almost seemed like every time Bill O'Brien dialed something up, he was attacking a portion of Georgia's defense that just wasn't a strength, whether it's personnel that are just getting on the field, it's personnel that should have been there by an injury. Georgia's got to tackle a lot better. Georgia just can't continuously get beat there by Alabama deep. And I think the thing that most of our viewers are probably circling on is like, where does Georgia go from here? Did they have to dial up a lot more Brock Bowers? They got to dial up a lot more George Pickens. I just know it was a terrifically different game from when Darnell Washington caught that ball, put Georgia up 10-0 early in the game, and then came Alabama. I think there's a false positive here of what everybody thought last week with Auburn and Alabama. We were all kind of led to believe that. We just didn't think Jamison Williams would make that big of a difference. But he certainly made a huge difference in Alabama's offense.
We're going to take a bunch of comments on YouTube here. Let me get a couple quotes here for this is from Kirby Smart saying, I have the utmost confidence in Stetson Bennett. Georgia coach Kirby Smart on the impact of the Alabama loss. It didn't do any damage. What it did was reinvigorate our energy, referred to it as a wake-up call. Yeah, I mean, listen, I love Kirby as much as anyone. I think for a lot of Georgia fans, I think one of the things that they probably grow a little weary of is the fact that every year Georgia needs some sort of wake-up call. The 2017 blowout at Auburn, that was the wake-up call for Georgia. The 2018 blowout at LSU, that was the wake-up call for Georgia. The 2019 loss is the 3-touchdown favorite against South Carolina. That was the supposed wake-up call for Georgia last year, or I should say in 2019. 2020, there were losses that could have been the wake-up call, but the wake-up call didn't come. And that's the problem here. This notion of, hey, we needed a wake-up call, we got it tonight. Listen, as I said before, Georgia wouldn't be in the position that it is right now, having been number one throughout the season and still seemingly a virtual lock for the college football playoff without Kirby Smart. So I want to keep some context here with all of this. But I don't like Smart in this particular instance saying, listen, this doesn't change anything for us. We just got the wake-up call that we needed. That's too casual an outlook when you got your brains beat in by the same coach that's been breeding in your brains year after year after year. If the quote that I'm reading is in the proper context, that's not a good line from Smart.
I mean, I'm sure most smart, logical people will sit there and go, what's the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. I think that's what we're getting here as Georgia butts up with Alabama. I mean, they're going to face each other again. That's my belief. I think part of Smart's logic there is probably grounded in all those great Alabama teams he was on, that they had a hiccup game. They lost one on the way to a national championship. And I think Georgia has bought itself some equity to go do this thing over again, but they got to do it differently. They got to attack it differently. Everybody can say a play here, a pick six here, a tip ball there. I just think Georgia has to look at this game plan. And you know what he kept saying all season? We still haven't played our best game. Well, it's obvious that with what Alabama showed us tonight, that it's going to take Georgia's best game to beat them.
Something else that's obvious, Nick Saban after the game to the media saying y'all all gave us, I think he called it some really positive rat poison. That was kind of his phrase there. And it was so clear this is what Saban was trying to build up to, this notion that his team just hadn't found their rhythm, hadn't found their gear all season long, and that's true. Week to week in the regular season, Alabama did not play well. But the one thing we tried to say, at least on my shows, a bunch it's like they say on the stock market commercials, past performance is no guarantee of future results. That what you had seen from Alabama for 12 games was not necessarily a guarantee of what you're going to get tonight. And it's pretty clear that Saban was trying to feed off that. Now, ultimately, I don't think the media comments necessarily provide that much fuel, but Saban certainly had a smile on his face last week after winning the game against Auburn. I think it's a team that he knows is nowhere near as good as some of the teams he's had in the past. But I said this over and over again, that individual superstar performances can erase a lot of blemishes. And Alabama is a team with blemishes. When you have a superstar that plays like one tonight, and that's what Bryce Young did, then all of a sudden a lot of that kind of stuff gets erased. And I think that Saban's willing to be relaxed right now and let this team maybe feed off a little bit of the nobody truly believed they could do this. Alabama an underdog, of course, tonight for the first time since 2015. And, Saban seemed to enjoy that narrative, something that Alabama doesn't typically get the chance to use very much.
Well, here's a thread that we've went through 4 games, and we've autopsied them on these shows as much as anyone. I don't think Georgia will ever beat Alabama by this formula. I don't. I think this is the 4th time. Somehow Alabama gets in these matchups with Georgia where their most instrumental player is always their quarterback. Their best player on the field, the catalyst for their victory is always the quarterback. Bryce Young, I said earlier, he wins a Heisman today. Georgia tried to get after him. He scrolled away. He scampered away. And, you look at Georgia's game plan offensively, and I think, Brandon, it goes back to where we were after 2019 Georgia, LSU. I think Georgia has to have a dynamite offense when they're going to get in one of these games. I think we needed to see more George Pickens. I think this is the point now where he's working his way back in. Well, he had some flashes. Darnell Washington had some flashes. I do see when I look at the Georgia's offense, to me it feels like it's way too reliant on Brock Bowers being special, being their best player on offense. And I'm going to tell you, I always try to look for little moments in the game. And I knew Georgia was kind of in trouble when we're going into the half. The game's going into the half, and Bryce Young had already just had a virtuoso first-half performance. And he stops at the tunnel, his helmet somewhere else, and he slaps the back of everybody that walks by coming into his locker room. And he'd been the player. Now is the time to be the team guy. And like I keep saying, man, Georgia needs to have a dynamite quarterback like that if they're going to be on the winning end of all these matchups in the future.
Okay, I promise we're going to roll through a lot of comments here. It's our Dog Nation post-game show presented by the UGA Bookstore. Of course, you can check out the UGA Bookstore online, UGABookstore.com, or stop by and see them in Athens. Get all those holiday shopping gifts bought for those dog fans in your life. UGA Bookstores get the best-looking apparel there is. You can find it at UGA Bookstore in Athens, right next to the Tate Student Center and across from the stadium, or online, UGABookstore.com. All right, we'll let you fire and let you say whatever you want to. We'll do it here. Ace Dog says our defense looked very sluggish from the very first series. I think that's what Chase and Bryce Young will probably do for you there. B.A.'s Cardigan and others talking about Ron Warbington, Jay Hamby. A lot of folks talking about the Stetson Bennett, J.T. Daniels thing for a moment. So let's stick with this. Here's the one thing I'll say about this that not everyone's going to agree with. In fact, most of you won't agree with, is that we can't be sure of how J.T. Daniels would have played tonight. But I do think it is appropriate, and I hope the media does this, push Smart a little bit more about exactly what's going on here. Smart, and I feel the need to caveat this once again, I think that Kirby Smart is an unbelievable steward of the Georgia football program. I truly do. But no man is infallible. I'm not going to treat any human being as if they are infallible. And one of the things that I think that bothers me about Smart from time to time He's far too comfortable offering no explanation whatsoever or contradictory explanations about what's going on in certain situations. And with his quarterback, when you play a game like this tonight where you get your blood beat out of you, and when the quarterback is certainly not part of the solution for why things weren't better, Smart tonight ought to be pressed in the quarterback situation. When he wakes up tomorrow, the next time he speaks to reporters, he ought to be pressed about this again. And listen, some of y'all may just have to come to grips with the fact that JT Daniels is not who you think he is. There's a chance that's just true. I don't know, but there's a chance that's true. But Smart ought to be pressed to answer these questions of why do you have, as the audience says, I want to use their words, these are not mine, these are their words, the walk-on starting over the 5-star. Smart ought to be pressed more as to why that is.
I mean, what was it your good friend David Pollack said in the preseason? Remember, he made the prediction that Alabama would beat Georgia in the SEC championship game, and Georgia would go on to beat Alabama in the national championship game. Lots of people are watching this, and I think it was pretty astute what BA just said there. You can't expect you start looking at the JT Daniels resume, why he's not starting, why he hasn't been able to take over the job, and there's one corner that goes, well, Kirby Smart and this program, the leadership of this program, they're not going to change something that's working. They thought their defense looked pretty much bulletproof in titanium, and now that's been rendered a moot point. You got to remember, though, lots of folks have kind of been saying this over the last few weeks is, JT Daniels had his sample size at USC, and then the Keaton Slovis thing came in. So if JT Daniels is what everybody thinks him to be, and he may very well author a great ending to Georgia's career, Georgia's season, or his collegiate career as well. But there was a reason why he left USC, and because it was clear that he wasn't the best quarterback there, the guy that was going to wring the job away from the young freshman that played well in his absence. And the fact that he's not getting back on the field, you've got to look at that really hard. And I thought there was ways Stetson wins the football game for Georgia, or is built to win the football game for Georgia. But, you saw some Zamir White runs. You saw some Kenny McIntosh runs. I think Georgia got away from that. And they got away from that before the score was 14, 17, 21 points as well. That's not the way I think you can win football games with Stetson Bennett.
Let me get Ryan M. here who says Kirby can recruit, but he hasn't shown that he can coach. He wins by having superior talent over lesser teams, but against equal teams, he's not priced to be able to out-coach or out-scheme. Yeah, look, I was critical earlier of the decision to punt 4th and 15 late in the game, down 2 scores. The honest truth is that's a game that's getting away from him there at that point in time anyway. Ultimately, here's the real issue, is that Georgia can't convince quarterbacks like Bryce Young to come to UGA, because you can say what you want about JT Daniels. I don't have any reason to believe he's anywhere near as good as Bryce Young is right now. And that's just the thing, is there's a caliber of quarterback that a program like Alabama can get that right now Georgia hasn't gotten yet. And maybe Brock Vandagriff turns out to be that guy, or somebody, Gunnar Stockton or somebody like that. But up until now, that's been kind of the issue. And you think about a guy like Jamison Williams, who left Ohio State because he's not getting enough playing time. That's the kind of wide receivers that program is getting. And, chose Alabama, what has typically been a pretty crowded receiving situation there too, because that's the kind of reputation Alabama has. So a lot of what you saw tonight, I think, to be fair to Kirby for a moment, is that final frontier that I think he still has to cross. And I don't have any reason to believe that he won't eventually cross it. But Georgia's got stacked talent almost everywhere. But when it comes to that throw game, quarterback throwing to wide receiver, that's the one area in which Georgia's still deficient, and that's the one area that Alabama exploited all night tonight. But listen, I'm not going to act like this even still wasn't a winnable game. And this is not me sugarcoating. This is not me trying to paint, a Pollyanna-ish picture here, because Georgia got its brains beat in tonight. But a couple of stops would made a lot of difference here tonight. That's something that if you get a rematch could maybe feel a little bit different. And for all the issues you have with the Georgia offense, the fact of the matter is, you see elite talents like Brock Bowers, what he's doing now, and you see obviously what Darnell Washington, what he's doing now. You do see some growth for the Georgia offense, and over the course of the season, it's been obvious that's true. So I guess my point here is, let's keep a little bit of context for what's going on. This is a Georgia team that showed you tonight it's got a lot of improving if it wants to do to win a national championship, but I'm not ready to pack it up and say that national championship couldn't still be won this year.
Logical question for you, BA, and I'll ask it to you, and then I'll answer it myself. How much reinvention do you think Georgia needs to go through over the next 4 weeks in order to have a different outcome in this one next time?
I don't mind telling you, I'm not smart enough to know. I'm not, like, when I watch Bryce Young doing what he did tonight, when I watch Jamison Williams do what he did tonight, I'm not going to stand up here and be something that I'm not. I don't know what you do to stop that. I really don't. Do I think that Georgia could have gotten a couple more stops tonight? I do. Is that based on reinvention, or, as Smart likes to say sometimes, just straining a little harder? I don't know. When you watch two guys that had it going the way they are tonight, I don't know what you do about that.
I mean, here's what they did. You know, what was it all along, Brandon? It was all along this season. The front seven and the box guys held it up for the back end. I think we said on our previous show, the one we did from the Dog Nation tailgate down there in the backyard plaza, is we said, remember those plays against Tennessee, the ones that were just outside the hands? We thought Alabama was going to make those plays, and turns out they did. I think what they found to be very concrete here, Georgia's defensive backs was always the weakness part of this defense, and they exploited it. And that's what really smart personnel coaches do. They find the weakness and attack it.
I want to get Alan V on YouTube, who says, is Bryce Young going to play worse in a rematch? Y'all act like history began 5 minutes ago. Alabama played last week, and 90% of the people who are watching right now spent all week telling me that Georgia's going to win by 50 points because of how bad Alabama played last week. So Bryce Young's already not played great 2 games in a row. They didn't have any points going into the fourth quarter last week. So this is the issue I kind of run into sometimes, is when things seem like they're going well, people want to scream at you if you act like that may ever change. When things are going poorly, people kind of want to scream at you on the other side for acting like things might ever be better. Alabama played last week, and no, Bryce Young did not have a very good football game, certainly for 3 quarters anyway. And obviously, Jamison Williams not playing was a part of that. But some of y'all act like history began 9 seconds ago. Have you watched Alabama play this year? Sometimes great players play well. But guess what? There's a lot of great players on the Georgia side of things that would also like their shot at redemption. Maybe they'll get it, maybe they won't. Maybe they'll play better when they get there, maybe they won't. But let's not be excessively defeatist here.
I mean, and the other thing, I think the frustration, and it's like the Peanuts episode where Alabama keeps pulling the ball away. They only had 1 or 2 scholarship tailbacks available. Somehow Brian Robinson Jr. found a way to play to make it 2. Jamison Williams, you saw parts of the game where Mechie went out. Jamison Williams did his thing. You see these Alabama players. And again, this feels like to me Georgia might have had the overall better unit, more talented unit, the deeper unit. But still the 3 best players in the game belonged to Alabama. That was Jamison Williams, Bryce Young, and Will Anderson in that order. And it's just – I know it's humbling, it's defeating, but I think you said something sort of terra firma a minute ago where you're like, we're doing this show again. Alabama showed it was better again, but this is not the end result of the season. I think Georgia has the ability to get back in that dance again with Alabama again, and everybody will go, well, will that motivate them? Will Alabama have one of its Texas A&M games again or one of its Auburn games again? Will Georgia find its best football? I just think Georgia's best football against Alabama has to be an attack where they try to find a way to score with them.
Greg Rosenberg says you're not going to get a bad game from Alabama in a potential national championship game. Well, first of all, and I know Greg knows this, Georgia's got to earn its way to that spot anyway and, frankly, be selected for the college football playoff, and we'll wait and see if that comes down tomorrow. I believe it will. But as far as Bama not playing well in a national championship game, 2018 wasn't that long ago. Alabama got dragged by Clemson. Now, are you really so willing right now to say 2018 Clemson is far better than 2021 Georgia? If that's the case, then what are we all doing to begin with? And I just think, look, here's the only thing that I can do is give people the platform to say what they want to say and also try to offer a little bit of perspective. I try not to get too high. I try not to get too low. I get yelled at on both sides of every single issue on a night like this because for some of you, I'm just not saying what you want me to hear or whatever else. But all I can do is try to acknowledge the facts when I hear them, but also acknowledge some of the stuff that's just a runaway train of emotionalism that's not connected to reality. So if you don't believe that Georgia has a chance to win a rematch with Alabama, or if you've decided the season's just to watch, you don't have to watch. When Georgia goes and plays on December 31st, you can go, to a New Year's Eve party if you want to. Now, my guess is most of you won't do that because by then you'll be feeling better than you do now, which I'm fine with. I go into a night like this knowing that it's going to be a hysterical collection of comments, one right after the other. I'm still going to give you the platform to say whatever you want to say, but I can't agree with all of it. More YouTube comments coming in, if I can see these. Jay Hamby on the subject of Pickens. Yeah, I mean, obviously when he gets that first quarter catch tonight and, coming back from injury like that, that young man should be commended to the heavens for how hard he's worked back to be back on the football field. And one of the great sadnesses for me as a Georgia fan is if this is the last year for Pickens, if he goes to the NFL after this, we saw so little of him in a Georgia uniform because it's fairly obvious that George Pickens is a truly special player. And sometimes you only get those guys for a fleeting moment. That might be the case with Pickens, but there's no doubt that George Pickens is one of the special dudes to ever wear this uniform. He's got a winning DNA. He is tough as nails. I wouldn't fight him with a pair of brass knuckles and a, Billy Jack or whatever else. I mean, that is a tough dude, and he showed it again tonight.
I mean, it showed it to the point where I think that when Georgia starts putting together the DNA of how they change this outcome the next time, I think Georgia has to designate him as the playmaker the way Alabama targeted Jamison Williams. And, man, you just got to – I mean, Brandon, we've seen this so many times. I look at the next recruiting class. There's a ton of great defensive backs coming in. There's a ton of great defensive linemen and linebackers coming in. That'll be great. That'll be a salty Georgia defense. But the same storylines we've been recycling, how Georgia kind of gets right there with Alabama, is they just need to have the weapons on offense to go with all that. They just simply do.
So Samuel Williams says you can agree if you want to, but Georgia, he says, doesn't play. I think he said, doesn't show up against real teams. And listen, I don't mind that being a narrative that comes out of this, especially when you connect it to some of the games I mentioned a moment ago. We can all go back and recite them. I think it's absolutely fair to lay it at Georgia's feet that we got to see you play better in big games. We got to see you show up and do it in the games that matter most. You just got to. And listen, Kirby's still a young coach, and he's going to rewrite his story as a coach for the next couple of decades. Time is on Smart's side. Some people try to do the whole championship or bust thing in 2021. It's a guy like Nick Saban who needs to win now because he's 70 years old. Kirby Smart's got 2 decades of top-flight coaching still left in him. He's got plenty of time. But in the now, and Smart's an insatiable competitor, he wants to win right now. It's absolutely fair to say to Georgia, to the Georgia coaches who lead this organization, hey, can you show up and play great in a big game? Because unfortunately, as Samuel pointed out, there have been a lot of instances where that hasn't been the case.
Well, I mean, I don't know if folks look at this because one of the job as an objective journalist is you've got to back things out, and I don't know if this is a perspective a lot of folks want to hear, but this is Georgia trying to topple the greatest dynasty in college football history. It's Nick Saban. He is the greatest coach in college football history. What he's done in the modern era, think how many great teams of sport, Brandon, would have been really stinking good if not for Michael Jordan's Bulls or the 80s San Francisco 49ers or the 90s Cowboys. This program is the standard for greatness, and Georgia's still got to try to crest it, try to find a way to get over it. Again, we can say this all the time. Saban reinvented himself. He did. He reinvented himself. He turned away from the defense. He turned towards the offense. And everybody I know does not want to hear this. They don't want to sit there and go, one of the things I'm happy about our broadcast so far is we're not rallying around that. Well, it'll be different. Georgia will do this. This scheme will be something. This scheme will be something. It's just really hard to beat Alabama. And this is just the latest example of that, how Georgia's – think where this program would be if not for the greatness of Nick Saban in Alabama. There'd be a lot of rings running around the state of Georgia right now, and there's a reason why folks call him the greatest coach ever, the dynasty of modern college football, like no other, and this is just another chapter.
Zane on DogNation.com says, I'd rather have a day like today and have a second chance in the playoffs than like 2018, where the Dogs played lights out to barely fall short and be left looking at the playoff from the outside. And I do think that's true. And I know it seems like no one's ever going to feel any different than the way they feel in this exact moment. But within a couple of days, assuming that Georgia gets good news from the playoff selection committee tomorrow, I think there will be a reconsideration of all of this. I think the one issue that you can't quite shake is what evidence do you have that Georgia will play better in another big game come December 31st? That's what Georgia's got to get to work on and fix. But honestly, I do trust this team to do it. Here's what I think is totally fair. I think you can totally say this is what the standard for Georgia should be. Georgia isn't meeting that standard, didn't meet that standard tonight, but I believe in the men in that locker room, the coaches and players who've been so dominant all season long to find a way to maybe achieve that the next time around. I mean, I think all three of those things can be true. There's a standard that you should expect the number one team. Georgia fell far below that tonight. Not the first time that's happened for UGA, but given a second chance, I do think these guys have a chance to play better. Some people don't want to hear that on a night like this, but it doesn't make it any less true.
Yeah, play better. And I don't even know if you can sit here and say the defense will play much better next time. I mean, Bryce Young, he is a special football player. I think the frustrating part is that Alabama keeps getting those special football players. And, me as a recruiting guy, seeing the talent that comes in, seeing the players that come in year after year, Last 4 years, Georgia's recruited the number 2 class in the country. Alabama's 2.25, and they just find a way for their guys to shine on this very, very, very big stage. Brandon, before the game, you talked to a lot of Alabama fans. They didn't even really think this was possible tonight. They didn't think that they were going to put gobs and gobs of points on Georgia's defense. They were confident because they know Georgia has a lot of numbers. They always have Georgia's numbers, but, man, again, I think the biggest takeaway from tonight is it's just reinforcement of what we thought things were heading into the season, is Georgia's going to have to score gobs of points in order to win a national championship.
On Facebook, Richard Sheffield brings up a point that also one of our DogNation.com commenters brought up, and I apologize for not remembering the commenter's name, and this is true. There are a lot of teams far below the caliber of Georgia that have played far better against Alabama. Florida's almost beat them twice. Almost beat them this year. Florida this year stunk. And almost beat them last year when Florida, frankly, wasn't, they were better than Georgia, but, or at least they won the game against Georgia when Georgia was banged up, but they weren't very much, and yet they almost beat Alabama in this very building. Arkansas played them closer. Auburn has won multiple times against Alabama, and Auburn couldn't beat Georgia if you gave them, 2 weeks worth of games to do it. I have no explanation for that, why so many teams who are seemingly Georgia's clear inferior have played in certain spots clearly better against Alabama than Georgia has. I have no idea when that's true.
Yeah, and I mean, what's the thing Kirby Smart likes to say is he says he doesn't like to compare years. He doesn't like to compare eras, different teams. Well, this is the same result against Alabama. A deflating loss, one of them that makes you look and see, are we as good as we thought we were, or do we need to play better? Is it a drawing board loss? For the most part, Brandon, I thought what Monken was trying to script was pretty good. He found a way to get guys open, scheme guys open. Georgia was just kind of forced to throw a lot of screens. Georgia was forced to throw behind the defense, below the coverage. And the difference was a lot of times Alabama's guys were game breakers. Remember that play when Bryce Young is scrambling, Brandon? And he gets loose, and then he pitches the ball to Brian Robinson, the junior, like an old-school Tommy Frazier pitch in the offense, and they get another 20 or 30 yards. Just seems like Alabama always is able to find it. I keep coming back to, I agree with you that point where you made when it was 4th and 15, and you're like, do you kick the field goal? No. You got to get those points. Everybody's making the narrative I see on social media that the one time all year you don't trust your defense. Folks, if they would have punted, if they would have kicked the field goal, you know what Alabama would have done. They would have flown down the field. And the biggest thing in this football
There's no difference between being down 11 and being down 14. There's just not. You still need 2 touchdowns. There's just no difference. And you say, well, you could have won with 2 instead of tied. There's just no difference in 11 and 14.
I mean, the other thing you got to realize is that, Georgia, and Alabama basically did it with the quarterback semblance of a running game. I think, what was it, Bryce Young had almost 300 yards passing in the first half. The only way you saw things going tonight, because Bryce Young had the handle, he was just elusive enough, he was getting rid of the ball quick, he knew his spots. The turnovers had to happen. Tip balls, Stetson had a bunch of his passes tipped today. You saw his legs a little bit, but you keep coming back to, there's a reliance on Georgia's offense on 1 or 2 personnel options, and they've just got to diversify it. If you're going to score with Alabama, everybody's like, what happens next? I'm not going to call for the quarterback changes, but I do understand people have every right to debate those, and they have every right to think that.
You think they should consider playing Daniels more, though, don't you?
I think you've just got to find a way to see what he can do with all these passing offenses, because I've said it about 7 times, I'll say it again. Georgia's going to have to find a way to win the shootout with Alabama if they're going to beat this football team again in the next meeting.
And there's one thing I feel the need to say about Stetson Bennett, and I promise we'll take a bunch of comments. I'm really going to try to go through as many as we can, y'all, give you a chance to have your voice be heard. Sometimes when I get a little frustrated with fans when they start, I think, taking it too personal with Stetson Bennett. And, one of the things that will come up sometimes are what people perceive as physical limitations. He's not a very big guy. People talk about his arm strength, things like that. But really, for the most part, I don't see very many instances where Stetson Bennett, when he comes up short, no pun intended, comes up short because of physical limitations. Stetson Bennett's biggest issue, and the thing that actually holds him back from being a top-shelf quarterback, if you want to say that he isn't one, it's his decision-making. Stetson Bennett hurt Georgia tonight not with physical limitations. When he threw the ball deep, he looked fine throwing the ball deep. Obviously, his athleticism actually is a plus for Georgia. The thing that hurt Georgia tonight with Stetson Bennett is his decision-making. That's the thing that you come back to here. When people kind of go to the personal shots with him and stuff like that, I think they're actually missing the mark. I know he doesn't look like a quarterback, but he's proven himself to be one. The thing that keeps him from being the kind of guy that you might fully put your trust in as a fan is he just makes some lousy decisions. And tonight, unfortunately, Stetson made a couple of lousy decisions.
Yeah, it's really hard to criticize, and people can. I mean, he knows he's got a spotlight job at the University of Georgia, but the young man squeezes out everything he's got. But, what's the way that he plays winning football in a national championship stakes game? It's playing smart football. It's not turning the ball over. It's, he does make all those plays with his legs, but, this is the thing. When the other guy, Brandon, is Bryce Young, and he's utilizing all those weapons, and he's throwing it around, and he's running it around, at some point in the stretch of this game, you've got to go score for score with Alabama. And or at least, we had the pick six. Georgia had the pick six tonight and everything else. You're going to be in the crosshairs because you're the quarterback. You're going to be in the crosshairs because you're this quarterback that's a walk-on, that went to junior college and came back and then won the job and lost the job and had to win the job back again. You're going to get all these statements and everything else, and that's unfortunate.
Stephen Wainwright says that JT Daniels should have been the starting quarterback 4 or 5 weeks ago. Maybe he should, but here's the thing I think you got to consider. You got to consider that maybe the answer for Georgia quarterback just doesn't exist. That I think the mistake that some people make sometimes is they assume, well, if Bennett's not getting it done, then maybe Daniels would have played better in this spot. If Daniels played tonight against Alabama the way that he played against Clemson, do you think this game's any closer? And I mean that legitimately. No, listen, I'm not interested in dragging Daniels through the mud any more than I'm going to drag Bennett through the mud. I'm truly not. But I think it's fair to point out that we saw Daniels against a very good defense against Clemson, and frankly, I didn't think he played a very good game that day. So my issue here is not with the people who say he should have been playing weeks ago. My issue is with the fact that the head coach of this team hasn't done a good enough job explaining why that wasn't the case. And Smart just hasn't. And listen, when Georgia's winning every game by 40 points, it becomes easy to just kind of shrug that off and pat him on the back and say, Kirby's just Kirby. When this happens, all of a sudden, folks want to start going back and kind of looking back at what was said weeks ago. I think a lot of the drama that exists amongst the fan base exists because Smart just doesn't feel much of a need to explain himself. And, at a certain point in time, you just wonder how long that can persist. Georgia's really good in a lot of areas, and I don't even think quarterback's the main reason why they lost tonight, but it was certainly one of the reasons why they couldn't keep close with Alabama tonight was because of the quarterback situation. And based on the couple of quotes I've read from the post-game press conference, Smart didn't offer much there again. So I don't really know what you do about that. I can certainly understand the source of frustration on that.
I got to a point with trying to understand. I understand Stetson and Kirby and JT. You said something earlier, the Clemson game. I got to a point maybe 4 or 5 weeks ago where I started asking folks, all right, if Stetson Bennett was the quarterback against Clemson, do you think Georgia would have scored more than 10 points? Most of the feedback I got was yes, Stetson would have scored. The way Georgia operates with Stetson in his legs, they would have scored more than 10 points. Brandon, how hard do you think it is for folks to believe? Who wants this program? You said the good word a minute ago, and the most passionate steward of Georgia football out there. Kirby Smart's name has to probably be right there, 1A, whatever you want to say. You do realize that he probably wants to win these championships in these games as much as anybody, correct?
Yeah, but that doesn't absolve him from criticism.
It doesn't, but again, it's part of this process where the media doesn't see things. You don't get to see why JT is not the guy. And, sooner or later, people have got to realize with what this staff does and the team has rallied around him that you kind of hear some of the answers if you listen real close. And it's this staff, this team, a lot of the players still feel he gives them the best chance to win. And maybe that's not what everybody wants to hear. And maybe for folks out there, if somebody wanted to make the opinion that, what Smart's done is he's taken Rick's teams from being the 6th, 7th, 8th, or 9th best team in the country when they're at their best and moved them to the 2nd best team in the country all the time behind an LSU or behind an Alabama most years. It probably feels just as frustrating. And that's what, if somebody wanted to make that comment about that's what Georgia football is, they're so much closer to the ultimate, but they're still not the ultimate.
Go back to Thursday, Dog Nation Daily, when I had Brad Nessler on the show. I talked about the moment from the Tennessee game when, remember Jamie Erdahl and Gary Danielson, Brad Nessler were talking about their conversation with Daniel's parents before the Tennessee game. And when we had Nessler on the show on Saturday, I should say on Thursday, talking about that Saturday in Knoxville, I asked him, kind of to expand more about what that was. And what Nessler said on our show Thursday is that Daniels and his family apparently thought he was going to get significant reps in the Tennessee game, and that didn't come. So there's clearly a disconnect there between what Daniels thinks is going on. I mean, if his family went to that Knoxville game thinking, well, our son's going to play a lot today, and he didn't play at all, then somebody's on the same page. And you can go back and listen to Thursday's show. Nessler says it as clear as day, and I know that's like hearsay, but that's Nessler having spoken directly to Daniel's parents. They thought he was going to play a lot that day, and he didn't. So that adds to the mystery and the intrigue on this about exactly what's going on here. So apparently, if you take that moment at face value, not only is the way in which this is handled kind of creating confusion amongst Georgia fans, it may even be creating confusion amongst one of the quarterbacks that's involved in this situation.
What that story brings up in my reporter's mind, Brandon, do you remember the Jalen Hurts Tua season where Jalen lost that game to Auburn? And what that convinced Alabama was like, hey, if this guy's not getting it done, we need to change it up and we need to go with Tua that season. And that was the difference in their football team. You want to talk about a reinvention. You want to talk about a major change. That's what Alabama and Nick Saban did when they're like, Jalen Hurts got us to this point, but if we get in a big ball game and we're down and it's not moving, we got to have something else. And Alabama's something else resulted in a national championship. Now, folks, I'm not going to say that's going to happen there with Georgia because I don't know what JT Daniels' reps look like. I don't know how surgical he goes against the Georgia defense. Every rep, every play in practices. The Georgia staff and the Georgia players know that. But
let me pause you on one thing here because I think you're bringing up an interesting point. Now, here's what I can tell you. There were rogue voices around Tuscaloosa in 2017. I talked to these people. They would have told you that they had been to practice, they'd been to scrimmages, and it was obvious that Tua Tagovailoa was better than Jalen Hurts. And you can't make that decision in the college football playoff to take Hurts out of the game unless you already knew that was true. There were rogue voices saying, I'm seeing practice, I'm seeing what's happened here, and Tua's just the better of the two quarterbacks. That's why Saban felt comfortable making the decision. Obviously, Hurts has accomplished a lot for Bama in 2016. It was weird to make that change. You wanted to try not to do it if you could. And remember, Tua was thinking about transferring in 2017 from Alabama because of his frustration related to that. But ultimately, Saban felt comfortable making the change because it was pretty obvious in Tuscaloosa that that Tua is better. Listen, I'm going to be as candid right now as I can be. A lot of y'all spend a lot of time on the internet. Are there any rogue voices anywhere saying that JT Daniels is outplaying Stetson Bennett in practice? I mean this literally. And listen, I'm not asking for a bunch of leaks of the Georgia program because ultimately that's probably not good for the team. But y'all, let's just be really down to earth, real, and honest. Are there leaks anywhere from someone like there were in Tuscaloosa? I mean, I said before, I was talking to people who were, talking to people and at these practices. They could have told you what Tua was doing throughout that 2017 season. So if you want to justify this notion how that Kirby Smart, like some sort of Manchurian candidate, is playing the worst of the two quarterbacks, you better be able to bring somebody who has put eyes on this practice to say, yeah, I saw JT Daniels. He's out playing Stetson Bennett every single rep. I try to stay as plugged in a lot of this stuff as I can. If that voice is out there, I haven't heard it.
Yeah, Brandon, it's not the quarterback's going to be the focal point, but it's personnel choices everywhere. So you saw Kenny McIntosh give you a little more tonight than maybe, Zamir did in spurts, or even James Cook. James Cook really didn't have a big game today, and I thought most people, the path for Georgia to get the victory tonight included James Cook looking a lot like he did against Tennessee, and Alabama was able to stymie that right there. You saw Ladd McConkey. Here's what it is. I just got to figure out how I can see this football team in a month and go, here's what I want to see. I want to see Ladd, Brock, Pickens. Quarterback would probably get a lot easier after that when you're finding a way to rotate those weapons in and let them touch the ball. Pickens ends up with 3 catches today, maybe 3 targets. Brendan, we all got to admit something here. Georgia was staying in this game early before things got out of hand in the third quarter because of a lot of pass interference penalties.
Yeah, I mean, look, you could do a lot of things differently on offense. You're still really not stopping Alabama enough to win this game today. I mean, whatever the recipe is for a better rematch, if Georgia's lucky enough to get one, you got to find a couple stops somewhere. And I'm not talking about holding them to 13 points. I'm talking about getting a couple of stops. You're going to be glad Georgia's got the defense that it has in a potential rematch, but you got to understand what great defense looks like in a game like this, much the same way the NFL playoffs work out for sometimes. It's about getting stops when you need to. That's the issue for Georgia. It's not that they gave up big plays. They just didn't get enough stops to match that. Now, Lee Burkett in our DogNation.com comment section brings up the comparison between Georgia and Notre Dame for that fourth playoff spot. Now, the concern that maybe Georgia gets passed up for this. I don't think there's much of a concern on that. And if that's what ends up happening, then I think you've got. I just think it's going to be one of the biggest miscarriages ever. I mean, let's look at the Georgia resume here for a moment. I'm going to use the playoff rankings from last week. Georgia has a win against number 23 Kentucky, a win against number 22 Arkansas. Georgia's got a win against number 20 Clemson. That's 3 ranked opponents that Georgia has victories against. Is that it for Georgia? Yeah, so Georgia has 3 wins against teams currently ranked in the top 25. I'm not an expert on Notre Dame's schedule, but do they have any other wins against top 25 opponents here? I don't believe. Y'all correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't believe they do. They obviously lost to Cincinnati, so I really don't know what the argument would be for Notre Dame over Georgia right now. And you could say, well, maybe there's a distaste about taking Georgia coming off a loss. If they were to lose out on Notre Dame under those circumstances, given the fact that last year Notre Dame made the college football playoff coming off a loss in the conference title game, at that point in time, my advice to the SEC would not to be to participate in the college football playoff anymore. Listen, I don't trust the committee. It's a bunch of dweebs sitting in a conference room. They're likely to do anything, obviously, but I just don't see what the numeric argument would be for excluding Georgia in favor of Notre Dame. I just don't think Notre Dame's got the kind of resume that would justify it over Georgia.
I think that the thing there is a Cincinnati-Notre Dame call there, and Cincinnati makes the playoff, Notre Dame does not. You've found the big meaty topic right now, which is going to be on Georgia fans' mind for at least the next 16 hours or whatever. Brandon, do you think the fall is to 3? Is that where Georgia goes to 3? You get 2 and 3 matchup there, and Alabama goes to 1, and somebody else has 4.
I think they will try to avoid the Georgia-Alabama rematch for 2 reasons. And I'm talking about the semifinal rematch for 2 reasons. Correct. First of all, if Alabama's going to 1, I don't know what the Big Ten title game looks like right now. You can make a case that Michigan has an argument to be the number 1 seed, and if that be the case, I think that Georgia would be number 4. If Alabama is the number 1 seed, then Georgia probably drops down to number 3. If this is for cosmetic reasons, they just don't want the rematch in the semifinal. I don't think the public would want that right away. The second thing is Alabama probably feels like it deserves some sort of reward for winning the SEC championship. And I can promise you this, Alabama's not going to be any more excited about playing Georgia in its very next game than Georgia is. The results of this game notwithstanding, Alabama would much rather play a Cincinnati right now than play a Georgia. I can promise you that.
Remember the last time those 2 teams duked it out here? Remember what Kirby Smart's narrative was? That team doesn't want to play us again. I can promise you Nick doesn't want to play us again right now. I think the way the nature will run its course is Bama and Georgia are going to meet eventually in Indianapolis, and there's going to be some hard looks at this film, hard looks at the personnel they have all across the field. I mean, it's not the quarterback for me. It's a lot of other spots, some spots on the defense as well, where, folks, it's not just to play good, sound football anymore. It's to find a way to beat Alabama. And again, I'm going to come back to a point that the biggest thing that comes out of my mind is you got to find the Georgia team that has a way to get to 38, 41 points against Alabama and then have those stops come in.
CB Williams says, oh, by the way, thank you to Matthews1 and Cincy Dog who gave me the 14-3 score for Michigan. I appreciate that. Also, CB Williams says the defensive backs got exposed. And listen, I mean, you can't really say anything other than that. And it is just sort of what it is. And there are a lot of teams that win national championships that don't have 22 perfect football players. Yeah. That Georgia's job is to say, okay, this is what we have. Let's go out there and try to work around that. But you better believe, I mean, and I don't think Bill O'Brien's had a very good year as Alabama offensive coordinator, but one of the things that he was capable to do tonight, and I guess you're going to give him the credit for this, one of the things he was capable of doing tonight was exploiting those mismatches over and over again. Kirby talked about this a year ago with Darnell Washington after the Missouri game, that when you get down to your safeties, when you get down to your nickelback, you're talking about third, fourth best cover guy. You're talking about a guy, the phrase that Kirby used at the time was guys that don't cover for a living. And, for the most part, that's what a lot of the Alabama success came in, especially early in this game. And then, Jamison Williams he's just a real tough guy to deal with.
I mean, you see Jamison Williams and you're like, why can't Georgia have that type of speed? Well, they had Arian Smith with that type of speed. He's just not the overall receiver around him that Jamison Williams is. And, that was the guy, you think about it, he was at Ohio State and he wasn't getting the run that he thought he was going to get at Ohio State as a clear-cut number one receiver. And he goes to Alabama and he finds all of that and then some here for Alabama. It was really weird after the game. He was calling his folks in the stands so he could find them, just so he could wave at them and everything else. He was doing those post-game hero interviews with SEC Network as well. And, I mean, I'm not going to call names because I think Georgia put the players in those spots that were the best. But you guys can look at the film in your rewatches. You can look at the TV copies tomorrow. And every time early in this game when Alabama was moving the chains, that was a guy that you could say, not a guy that's considered Georgia's best players on defense. Even Darian Kendrick got exposed a little bit today head-to-head with Jamison Williams because that's going to happen. You have two future first-round NFL draft picks going against it. But to tell you one thing Bill O'Brien did is he found in his matchups a way to get a guy on a Georgia guy that, probably wouldn't be starting unless certain situations had happened in the course of the season.
Dog Nation post-game show presented by the UGA Bookstore. Check out the UGA Bookstore online, UGAbookstore.com. Stop in and see them. Tate Student Center right next to it, right across from Sanford Stadium. Get stocked up for all your holiday gift-buying needs. Good-looking UGA apparel. You get that there at the UGA Bookstore. I want to read this comment from, if I can see by the lights of my eyes, Nathan Edwards, who says, recruiting is not going to matter until we get an elite quarterback. Look, I'm going to be, once again, as frank as I possibly can be here for a moment. The way in which Georgia gets first pick, although almost every position group, offensive linemen seems like, certainly the players on defense, running backs. Georgia doesn't get first pick on quarterbacks and wide receivers. There's a caliber of quarterback and wide receiver right now that Alabama can get, that Ohio State can get, previously Oklahoma can get. We'll see if that remains to be true. There's a caliber of quarterback and wide receiver that other programs can get that Georgia just has to wait in line for right now. And listen, that puts the responsibility on Georgia to win with what it has, develop what it has, be as good as you can be with what you have, and then that'll unlock you for the kind of players that maybe you really want. But Georgia's had to work hard to get the talent that it has on offense right now. Georgia went from 2009 to 2019 without ever signing a five-star wide receiver. That was a drought this program experienced, and it predate Kirby Smart. Quarterbacks, Georgia gets some very good ones. And there are guys on this roster right now I think have a chance to be very good quarterbacks. But Bryce Young would not have given Georgia the time of day. He just wouldn't.
Well, it's kind of funny how Georgia was trying to recruit him late. They were trying to recruit C.J. Stroud late. Actually, the Carson.
I know you're the expert on this, but once Ohio State was truly involved with C.J. Stroud, it's almost like the Georgia door is closed forever.
Yeah, I mean, it was a pecking order. Like you said, the guys get first pick. It's still kind of funny that, Carson Beck was the number one choice for Alabama's Nick Saban in that class. And Carson Beck decommitting and choosing Georgia allows Alabama to get in the Bryce Young business. Kind of painful and kind of fleeting to think about that right now. But, the words you were going over, Brandon, here's what kept coming in my mind. The thought bubble in my mind was they got a guy, and that's Pickens, and you need to utilize Pickens in the rematch to his fullest.
If he's truly healthy enough to sustain that. I don't know that he is. I mean, I was pleasantly surprised he caught the balls that he did tonight. He played more and played better than I expected him to tonight. Jeff, he just may not be healthy enough to do that.
Maybe, but then you got another 3 weeks now. More time to get him ready. I mean, look on that fade ball, Brandon. That one he went and turned around and redirected his body to get it. That was classic George Pickens. And the one thing it did do is he draws a lot of attention when he's out there on the field. And a lot of times, Alabama, I was watching, they went from single coverage, and then they're like, okay, he showed us a little bit more. And then they've kind of changed and drifted to safety over the top on him as well. I mean, and again, Georgia kept punching and staying in this, and that was really just feeding the ball to Brock Bowers as much as it could. Variety in offense, another playmaker besides Ladd McConkey needs to happen for Georgia. It's going to be a shootout when they face them again. The way Georgia beats Alabama, my own opinion here, is they're not going to beat them 21-14 or 21-13 with an impressive defensive goal line stand, kind of like the stuff you saw today against Baylor. It's the same place we were at the beginning of the season. Georgia needs to score to win this type of ball game.
You got to score at least 30 to do that. Now, you still need more stops you got tonight. I mean, the number one reason Georgia lost tonight was defense, not offense. The offense wasn't good enough to win, but the offense was already dealing with a game that was lost because they couldn't get any stops against Alabama tonight, not when it mattered. So the number one headline was they didn't get enough stops against Alabama, and if they had, they may not still scored enough. But the Georgia defense got torched tonight.
Yeah, I mean, most of the stops came when Alabama was already up 38-17, something like that. And that's the thing, is the stops need to happen later in the game. What Alabama was able to do, and I didn't think their defense was that good as it showed tonight. What Alabama was able to do is they put a lot of pressure on Georgia where they're like, okay, Georgia needs to get points this possession. Georgia needs to move the ball this possession. Georgia can't have a turnover this possession. And only about 40-50% of the time was Georgia able to answer the bell.
So Chris asked an interesting question at dognation.com about when it comes to those big passing plays that Alabama hit, is that an issue with a deficient scheme for Georgia, or is that Georgia players getting just outmanned that spot? And, I'm going to try to choose a third choice here. You've got to find a way to get a pass rush on Bryce Young. I mean, when it comes to what Jameson Williams does well, we knew he was a burner, and we knew he had the ability to run past people. There is only so much you can do about that, just the God's gift that Jameson Williams has. There's only so much you can do with that. You've got to try to affect the game in other ways. And I don't know what you do about this. I don't know how you keep Young contained while also getting pressure on him. It's the kind of thing that Smart's talked about in coaching clinics and things like that before, but obviously against a specimen like Young, it's more difficult to do. But you got to get hands on Young. You have got to impact. If you're lucky enough to play, and listen, if Georgia plays the way it did tonight, they'll be watching Alabama on TV come January because they won't be in that game because they stunk up the joint tonight. But if you are lucky enough to get that rematch, you have got to make Bryce Young uncomfortable. They couldn't touch him tonight. It's like I used to be a big boxing fan, and I used to be. I stopped spending money on these pay-per-views. Floyd Mayweather, I got so sick of him because he's making $100 million for these fights, and he's not doing anything. He's just standing there, and he's moving around, and nobody can get a hand on him. And obviously, Mayweather's a terrific athlete to avoid all this punching. But at a certain point in time, it's like, well, he's not fighting back. He's also not getting hit. This is just boring. And Young tonight was almost like a Floyd Mayweather type thing of he's just dancing around. They just couldn't get to him, and that can't be true. If Georgia's lucky enough to play Alabama again, they have got to rough him up a little bit.
I mean, I said this when we started. That was mine when I was walking through the concourses to get to BA when I was watching this game. And everybody's going to talk about the player that was missing, the player that Georgia needed to have here or there. Brandon, who was Georgia's most effective pass rusher this season?
I'm going to say Adam Anderson.
It's Adam Anderson.
But you can't do anything about that.
You can't, but I'm talking about this is the first game where I'm like, they're not going to, they tried rolling in a lot of guys, Brandon. They brought in Chaz Chambliss from the edge a little bit to give Trayvon Walker a spell. They were trying to move guys around, but this is the game. And I'm meaning this, and it's a regretful situation. But just as a football standpoint, football player standpoint, matchup standpoint, this is the game where the loss of Adam Anderson, probably the team's most effective pass rusher, at least in terms of hurries, as effective as anybody they've had the last 2 years, along with Azeez Ojulari. This is a game where you need more pass rush, and if you know football and you watch football, that's a guy that would have been Georgia's quickest and fastest pass rusher to get those extra steps.
Yeah, but they've had multiple guys getting multiple sacks here this year. I don't think this game's any different if Adam Anderson plays.
I'm just saying he's going to.
At least I don't have reason to believe it would.
He's going to get to the quarterback a little bit quicker. I thought another big play, I don't know if anybody talked about this. This was a game where you needed a little bit more out of Nolan Smith. I think most people are going to remember Nolan Smith as for the play where he had the ability to jump on the ball and he tried to make a play and scoop it and score it. Nolan was probably thinking about that great play he made in Jacksonville, another terrific game-changing play there as well. But that's a part in this game where everything is intensified and everybody looks at this, that, and whatever. The way you stop Alabama is you affect the quarterback, and Georgia didn't do that enough tonight.
Trevor Maffetone doesn't think we're calling out Kirby Smart enough tonight, but I feel like we've kind of given him plenty of grief for his inability to effectively explain what's happening at quarterback. I think he needs to do a better job at that. I've talked about the baffling decision not to go for it on 4th and 15 there late in the game, and I've even went down the road of the issue of kind of getting over the hump in some of these big games, high-profile games, certainly against this opponent in particular. I feel like we've taken Smart to task for that tonight. so I'm a little bit I'm confused where that comment's even coming from, to be completely honest with you. Let's see what else. DMart 42 and others talking about the absence for Nolan Smith tonight. And, this is one of those things where, Nolan's just bringing a little bit different size profile to the table. And I think, unfortunately for Nolan, he's a good player at Georgia, but he's never quite been the nation's number one recruit. And that's just a fact. Sometimes it just works out that way. In the case of Nolan Smith, he just stopped short of being the nation's number one recruit. He's had some really good games for Georgia this season. I think overall he's had a very good season. But in a night like tonight, that lack of size, especially when you're battling against an Evan Neal or somebody like that, it is a little hard for Nolan to win those battles in that pass rush situation. This would have been a great night for Nolan Smith to have a great game. And, he probably didn't do that tonight.
I mean, Alabama's best players played like All-Americans tonight, right, Brandon? All their best players played like All-Americans on a big stage. You see that old, tired, cliche, big-time players, big-time games. And, when you start thinking about where was Georgia's pass rush tonight, well, who's Georgia's probably best pass rusher right now on the field? It's Nolan Smith.
And to be fair to Nolan, as I said before, he was huge in the Florida game, and he's had some nice moments for Georgia. There's no doubt Nolan's going to go on to an NFL career and things like that. But if Nolan falls short of being a first-round pick, things like that, it's the way in which bigger players have been able to control him that I think becomes the issue. He's also playing with an injury right now. Yeah. But when you think about what's going to hold him back a little bit, I think that's probably fair to say.
I mean, I think the biggest thing with Kirby Smart, when everybody's taking him to task or whatever, the biggest thing on Kirby Smart's resume right now as a Georgia football coach is that his program is not Alabama. His program has not been able to beat Alabama. There are a lot of players in the NFL making a lot of money that just haven't been able to put together those great games against Nick Saban's Alabama. And, I mean, I don't want to make this an example where, Nolan let Georgia down. I don't think that at all. I think Nolan loves Georgia as much as anybody. I think if you cut him, he would bleed red and black. But this was a game where you needed him to play great. You needed him to be an equalizer. You needed him to really show that, that wolf pack, that pass rush, especially when you got a quarterback that has a lot of time. I think I saw one point where Bryce Young is like this, Brandon, and he just points to an end zone, to corner of the end zone, and he has the time to get that ball off. He's an elusive quarterback. He's an accurate quarterback. He rolls around. He's not very big. And there were a couple times Georgia hit him. Channing Tindall also is a guy that brings up my mind. Brandon, he put his face mask in his chest, and the thing that I think made Bryce Young great is he continued to play his best football after I know he got slammed.
Yeah, good stuff there. Let's get some more comments here on Facebook here for a bit. Matt Rugavina's not happy here tonight.
Nobody should be happy. I mean, that's the one thing.
For sure. Let's see what else. Trying to find something we haven't quite talked about here yet.
One good thing about tonight, I'm ever the optimist. Those leaf blowers are down there, man. We don't hear them at all.
Yeah, we're a little higher up tonight. They're transforming the field to get ready for Falcons game tomorrow, so we're a little higher up here tonight. Stanley Dunn on the subject of JT Downs not playing. I mean, at a certain point, I'd love to have a more thorough explanation for all this. Rich Olenek said that he thinks it's weird there's so much quarterback talk when it's really the defense that kind of got torched tonight. I think there's probably room for, all of this. Here's something else I want to say, and I think for some people this is not quite the thing they want to hear on a night like this, but I do think it's fair to point out that it is obvious that Georgia has not gotten over the hump against Alabama, and that's the hurdle they can't seem to clear right now. And that's a blemish in terms of the way that Georgia's evaluated on a national basis. But it's also important to point out that most programs aren't measured by Alabama. That, every year in the summertime there's this list of top coaches in college football, and it seems like Smart's a little lower on that list than some guys, even guys that he's beaten head-to-head. And to me, it seems like the one big difference is we judge the Georgia program as somehow kind of a B-plus level program or, something below the truly elite level because it's lost games like this to Alabama. But most teams play in a conference where the opponent on the other side of them in a conference title game won't be a team the caliber of Alabama. Now the goal for Georgia to win a national championship is not to be second best, so why not measure yourself against the Crimson Tide? But there are a lot of people who are going to give Georgia a lot of grief because it keeps colliding with Alabama and losing. But most teams either aren't good enough to play Alabama as frequently as Georgia's played them in games like this, or they play in a conference where the level of competition doesn't rival anything close to what Alabama brings to the table. So once again, if it's appropriate to provide some context, that's what I'm going to try to do, is that, we found out again tonight that Georgia's just not quite ready to beat this Crimson Tide team yet, but that doesn't have any kind of statement about what it could do to every other team in the country if it had a chance to do just that. And hopefully in the college football playoff, in a national semifinal game, Georgia will have its chance to go out there and do that. And, you know, one way or another, if Georgia's right back there in a national championship game, then I think that's a lot for some Georgia fans to feel good about, which is not what people want to hear tonight, but I'm saying it anyway.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing there that everybody should – the chord everybody should play and listen to is, man, Georgia's just not Alabama. They're still just not Alabama. Alabama is great. They're amazing. They're the big bad wolf, whatever you want to call it, and Georgia's just not there yet, even on a year that was just dripping with glory and special. You know, one thing I got to see, Brandon, these two teams, I think they're going to dance again. They're going to get in the ring again. And I'll be frustrated if we're doing this broadcast again and it looks like the same things Georgia tried tonight. Do you understand what I'm saying with that?
Yeah, and Andy Hawley kind of brings up a similar point. He says this game reminded him, or at least he brings up a point that makes me remind me of what you said. He says this game tonight reminded him of the 2019 SEC championship. And I'm honestly curious what folks feel about this, that I think that 2019 Georgia team against that 2019 LSU team, unfortunately, in repeated rematches, I don't think Georgia was ever going to beat that team that year. Am I being a Pollyanna for thinking that that's not necessarily true for this Georgia team, this Alabama team this year? I mean, you can't just decide 12 games of regular season football don't matter at all. You can't do that. And the immediate result is obviously heavily favoring Alabama. But there's a reason why you play, 13 games on the way to a college football playoff that, certainly my interest will remain piqued if Georgia plays Alabama again at any point in time in the college football playoff. I don't think this is a 2019 situation where, had Georgia, made the playoff, they were still going to lose that LSU team over and over again. Georgia just didn't have the horses really at that time, I would say, on either side of the ball in terms of developed defensively and certainly offensive firepower to match LSU. But I'm not there right now. Georgia got its teeth kicked in tonight, but I'm not scared of playing that team again.
Well, here I just look at that so much differently, Brandon. That team, the play calling, the weapons, I don't think that team would have ever gotten to 31 points against LSU because they simply don't have the ability. Georgia still's got, Bowers. You see more of McConkey. You got Pickens maybe coming back with a little bit more. The running back situation. Remember in that game, DeAndre Swift was limited. He was probably never going to be healthy the rest of the postseason. That team didn't have the weapons. They didn't have the scheme. They didn't have a lot of the supporting pieces and the explosive players around him. I think Georgia's offense is in a much better state than LSU 2019. It's just, to me, got to look differently when these two teams meet again. That's really, I'm going to keep coming back to that. Got to look differently. Got to say that we've learned from this. We're doing this differently. And it really, this is a total team loss. I mean, the defense, you can use the word scorched, bludgeoned, bloodied, skid marks, whatever you want to do. Somehow Georgia could not get through. Everybody's noticing on the broadcast and on social media, Alabama's offensive line played a lot better this week than they did against Auburn. Georgia was kind of always in his face, always harassing him, and Bryce Young was just dancing away with magic dust on his heels and finding a way to find the open guy to extend the play and everything else like that. I think this is certainly a game where Georgia has to look at itself internally. They've got the time and the ability to do so, and they got to find a way to make things different the next time.
B.A.'s Cardigan says there's no way in hell I want Georgia to play Alabama again this year. I don't know what to tell you. I mean,
man, you got to beat the man, right?
I just don't know what you would do with that. You're not going to watch? I mean, Clint Cougar says, man up. I honestly don't even know what that means. I don't even know what that means in that spot. I mean, some of y'all whine like babies when Georgia loses a game when somebody doesn't say what you want them to say. Here's the thing I know. I've stood here in this spot over and over again. How many of these disastrous post-game shows have I done over and over again? Some of y'all are going to feel different 2 days from now. You live in an emotional box. You can't see beyond your own emotion. I can promise you this, in a couple of days, some of y'all are going to sober up and you're just going to feel different. I know now what you will learn later on. So
the glass case of emotion?
I guess so. Let's see what else. I mean, Kevin Grammer saying it too. What does man up even mean in this particular case? What do you babies want to hear that I'm not saying to you? I'd honestly love to hear that. Like what is it that you want to hear?
Most of the comment section saying is the basis, the baseline of opinion, are they defensively, the defense let Georgia down, and that's why Georgia is not having confetti blown over, blue and yellow confetti blown all over the place? Is it offensively? Is it personnel? Is it Barb's? It's Smart? What are most people reacting to tonight? Folks, I want to ask you point blank. What's the biggest, most disappointing thing about this Georgia football team today?
It's the quarterback, Jeff. It's the quarterback. And here's the thing you got to understand is there is a chance that Kirby Smart, who's watching JT Daniels each and every day, knows that Daniels is not what some of y'all think that he is. And some of y'all will just go racing to the feet of any grifter who tells you what you want to hear. But there's a chance that Daniels is just not some of maybe what you want to think he is. Or maybe he is. And maybe he's going to have his moment in the college football playoff. Some of you said they weren't challenging Kirby Smart enough. We've been doing the show now for 45 minutes, whatever else. We've talked plenty about this. I'm absolutely of the belief that Kirby Smart ought to be pressed more about why he's not playing JT Daniels. I think he ought to be forced to make an explanation. Smart hasn't given a sufficient explanation on that. But some of y'all have conjured up this notion in your mind that somehow you know what Smart doesn't, and you got to be smart enough to know that's not true.
Quick sample poll, guys. I want you to answer this question for me. Let's say Georgia made a change tonight with JT Daniels, and he got the second half. Results look largely the same. Would everybody be powerless now to try and figure out what's going on? Would there not be any hope? Would there not be any, well, this is just what it is? And, again, these coaches are paid to win. Kirby's paid to win championships now. That's his standard. And for things to think that things would be dramatically different if JT Daniels rolls in there, I have a hard time believing that.
And somebody asked about how this is going to affect recruiting. So somebody said, ask Jeff. He's the recruiting expert. I don't need Jeff to tell me about this. Georgia's got a quarterback commit right now in the place of Gunnar Stockton. You think Gunnar Stockton gives one rip whether JT Daniels plays or not? Gunnar Stockton's going to be here in 5 minutes. He's not thinking one thing about JT Daniels. You don't need the recruiting expert to tell you that. Open up your dadgum eyes and look for yourself. It's not affecting Georgia recruiting one bit. Arch Manning was in Athens the day they jerked JT Daniels out of the game and put Stetson Bennett into the game. He threw an immediate interception. You think if Georgia was worried about how it would affect recruiting, they'd be doing that in front of Arch Manning? None of these recruits care a rip about JT Daniels. Now, maybe they should, and maybe Smart really is making the wrong decision. But how is this affecting recruiting? It's not affecting recruiting at all. And you don't have to be a recruiting reporter for a living to see that. Open up your eyes and notice that for yourself.
I mean, the thing that is going to happen every year is Georgia is going to bring in the players, at least for the last 4 or 5 years. I've heard it. Things are going to be different. We're going to do a little bit more. This guy's going to be special. This guy's going to be that. This guy's going to help. This guy's going to amplify things. I mean, again, don't get into a shootout with Alabama unless you got – this is the narrative that keeps repeating it. It's LSU. It's Alabama. Don't get into the shootout with Alabama unless you don't think you're capable and prepared to win a shootout with them.
Let's get some more comments here. Trevor Maffetone said Kirby did not throw the kitchen sink at this game. I don't know. I mean, it seems like they were certainly trying a lot of things defensively, just none of it worked. They just got outclassed by Alabama today. I don't know there was an example of, unfortunately, I think the opposite may be true. I think Georgia tried a lot today and just none of it worked.
Yeah, I mean, everybody thinks about football game as a teeter-totter, a yin and yang, and you count up all those pass interference penalties. You count up how they had to go to the Brock Bowers well over and over and over. There was a play. Do you know how close that ball was when there was a ball in the end zone when the game was still very well contested? Bowers has it in his chest. He comes down with it, and it's knocked out as he comes to the ground, and the ball kind of bounds away from Brock Bowers right outside of his helmet. I mean, what did he have, 9 catches, 12 catches tonight for about 135 yards? Ladd McConkey showed you something. The recruiting guy, he needs to find out a way. And, folks, maybe not want to hear this. This year's recruiting class, you know who the 12 highest-rated players are? 9 of those guys are on defense. Again, it's Georgia continuing to augment and get first draft picks, like Brandon said, all across certain select parts of the ball. They just need to find those X factors on offense.
I'll get a few more comments here. Stephen Venanzi says we need to improve the secondary. Can't keep giving up the 15-yard outs. I mean, the problem is like, this is what you got for right now. I mean, it is. And they would have loved to have had, the same level of talent 2 years old or more experience. They didn't have that. They went out and tried to get that in the transfer portal. You bring in Darian Kendrick, you bring in Tyke Smith. Tyke Smith got hurt. There were rumblings before the season began that even had Tyke Smith stayed healthy, he may not have held off Latavius Brini. I don't know that they were necessarily thrilled with what they had with Tyke Smith when he came in. That's just a fact. That they had to go to the transfer portal to take care of some areas. They lost a lot of guys off that spot last year. There's just only so much you can do to get better right now that they just have, some issues there right now.
I mean, what everybody thought going into this game, that this was a championship team, this was Georgia's best team, kind of feels like a false positive now. But for Georgia to really show that they have championship resolve, a lot of those guys are just going to have to be truly pissed off about this one and find a way to make the outcome different the next time around.
Let's go over to Facebook here for a little bit.
Didn't mean to say that word on your show, but that's kind of what it feels like right now.
What's that now? Oh, that's fine. Drew Roman says the only game that matters is Alabama. I mean, I guess so, but obviously if Georgia's going to be lucky enough to make the college football playoff, it's going to have to win another game to get back there to that spot.
It feels like Michigan, Georgia. What do you think? If you had to put a Coca-Cola on it right now, what would you say?
Probably so. I mean, I think that's probably I think that's what Alabama deserves winning the SEC, is the chance to play a team like Cincinnati in the semifinal and get a chance to, to avoid a Michigan or a Georgia until you get there, because Cincinnati is clearly a step down from either of those two teams here in 2021. And
it feels like now that Alabama, Cincinnati goes down in Dallas, and then Michigan, Georgia goes down in Florida. Is that kind of feels like the pieces are working?
Yeah, it seems like if the number one seeds were probably heading towards Dallas, I just don't think they want their players wilding out in Miami. And so now that Alabama, if it is number one seed, that's what it's going to probably be. But I mean, there's also a chance that if Michigan wins the Big Ten title game impressively enough against a 10-2 Iowa team, maybe Michigan, who was number 2 this past week, I mean, I guess you could say Alabama beating number 1 would be enough to vault at number 1, but there could be an argument for Michigan there too. Either way, I believe they will finagle the rankings to keep Georgia and Alabama from playing immediately again. Now, had this been like one of those like 38-35 type games where it literally came down to the very last play, there may have been a motivation to play the game right away again to kind of continue what had been a good game. This wasn't a very good game tonight, and so avoiding it unless you have to may be what they want to do.
I just feel the inertia of the thing, and it's a really simple comment. Bryce Young's going to win the Heisman Trophy after this one. Alabama knocks off number 1 Georgia very impressively. They're going to move to number 1.
Get some more comments here.
Defending national champion, all that stuff.
John Benton says he's not liking my energy right now. Jeff is saving the show. Well, I guess I'm glad Jeff's here. But honestly, and I love John's comments. I like all of you. Write me a script what you want me to say. What is it that you people want me to say? Georgia got its teeth kicked in against Alabama today. What do you want? What do you want to hear? I honestly don't know what it is that you want me to say. I am happy to say whatever. Literally, write a script, and I will read it off my phone. I'm happy to say whatever you want me to say. Some of y'all are taking your frustrations out on me when it ain't me that is the one that's disappointed you tonight. Richard Michael says, I'm new here, not a dog fan, but who's BA? Thank you, Richard. Appreciate you being here. Thomas Kilpatrick says Pickens wasn't really utilized. Have you ever considered for a moment that George Pickens actually just got back from tearing his ACL? Maybe he's not healthy enough to play more than he is right now? I mean,
you're right. Brandon's right when he says maybe Georgia, it's a valid point. Georgia squeezed out probably 4 more dollops than they thought they could get out of George Pickens as it is. And you might want to have to hope for more in about 3 or 4 more weeks.
I mean, some of you are not liking what you're hearing from me right now. You're about to really hear from me in a moment. Put your thinking cap on and see if you can figure out why George Pickens didn't get more catches tonight. See if you can figure it out. I'll give you a couple seconds. I bet you might get there eventually. And I hate to talk that way, but I mean, at a certain point, like, what else is there to be said? George Pickens tore his ACL, came back courageously to play last week, played more tonight. Lucky he played some, and that's just kind of it.
Impactful play. I think Georgia caught fire with that play. I thought they caught fire with the Darnell Washington play. And, the script of this game is like Pickens, Washington, Georgia's pulling out all the stops out of the cupboard now. And then here came Alabama. And Brandon, very decisively, I think the game turned on 2 big explosive drives from Alabama when they turned 10-0 into 14-10. And everybody was going, wow, that's the defense that everybody thought. 83 points in 12 games. and that was Alabama raking.
Seth Ritchie says Kirby didn't adjust at halftime. The honest truth is they probably tried to adjust at halftime. They just couldn't do anything with Jamison Williams and Bryce Young. I'm sure they had plenty of adjustments. Now, they didn't make personnel adjustments because they're already playing the best players. And that's the thing, is like there isn't some magical fairy on the bench that's turning guys into players they aren't are. If there were better players in the 11 that were on the field, they'd already be playing. There's just no personnel on defense. There's no personnel adjustment to make because the 11 best guys, for the most part, are already playing, or the 22 best guys, or whatever Georgia's rotating. There's nobody else to put in the game.
So here's what we said earlier: the definition of insanity is expecting a different result when things happen over and over and over. Brandon, last year they had all the DBs in the world, and Georgia's going to get the best DBs in the country this year. The problem is when those guys are maturity and fruition, they're not going to have the front seven that they do right now, or maybe it won't be as good. Here's the thing that's got to change. Modern college football, Georgia's still struggling to get that 1,000-yard receiver. Georgia still struggling to get that distributor that's capable of putting up 350 yards passing against a big ball team on a big night like tonight when the championship belt's on the line. That's the difference. And Georgia's always going to have pieces on defense. Maybe they'll be better defensively. Maybe they'll have more pass rush last year like they had with Azeez Ojulari. There may be one cycle, one ebb of recruiting away. The thing is, offensively, you still don't look like the team you haven't been able to beat. Alabama has trotted out 7 first-round draft picks, I think, at receiver in the Kirby Smart era. Georgia has none.
So Ryan M. says, here you go, B.A. Kirby has either a problem at recruiting the right quarterback or developing the quarterback. It has to be one or the other.
Quarterback and receivers. You got to put them both together.
But, what Georgia deals with on the quarterback receiving side of things is the same thing that every other program deals with at all positions. Remember 2 springs ago when Tennessee had some commitments from some 4 and some 5-star guys, and it looked like to the casual observer, mainstream media type, Tennessee's going to have a top 10 class. It's very easy for those of us that watch this stuff closely, me and most of you, to say that's not really going to happen. Those players aren't really going to go to Tennessee. They're going to have better options. And unfortunately, right now, when it comes to quarterback and wide receiver, the very best in the country just feel like they have a better option than Georgia. And that doesn't mean you can't win with what you have, and it doesn't mean you can't develop what you have, and you used that word develop in your comment there a moment ago. This is one of those things where y'all don't want to hear this, but it is true. Georgia did develop its offense better than it ever has. They got more out of guys like Ladd McConkey and A.D. Mitchell this year and players like that than you ever would have thought was reasonably possible before the season began. That even if this season ends in another disappointment like tonight, this was still a year in which Georgia took a much bigger step forward offensively, and that's just the truth. But when it comes to look at Jamison Williams. You don't think Georgia would have liked to have tried to get Jamison Williams to transfer from Ohio State? He didn't give them the time of day because that is not it's like a video game. It's just not a level that Georgia's unlocked yet. And you keep doing good stuff with the guys you have, eventually you'll get more of the guys that you want. But that's the uphill climb Georgia's facing because the positions they don't have as much of right now are the positions that it really, truly matters. And that's just it. The very best quarterbacks, the very best wide receivers, right now, they're just choosing to go somewhere else.
Brandon, this is a great platform where it feels like a moratorium or it's an obituary as we chop up another reason why Alabama's better than Georgia. I don't like watching movies. I don't like watching the same. I never watch movies 4 times that I don't like. And here we are in the fourth installment of this movie. But, where Georgia is at with this team is Alabama. Here's the thing. 1-sentence analysis here. And if you think I need to give you any more than that, tell me. Georgia's defense played a bad game against Alabama. There wasn't any way they were going to win this game, period.
So Trevor Maffetone in the YouTube comment section talking about benching Stetson Bennett. And I guess here's my question. And I haven't seen the full transcript of Kirby Smart's press conference tonight, but I am kind of curious to find out. Can you go about this if you're Kirby, business as usual, and just pretending because that is the seemingly one personnel switch that you seemingly could make if you want the results to be different next time. And I don't think offense is the main reason why Georgia lost this game, but it's the one button you could push because at the beginning of the year, JT Daniels was the starting quarterback, Stetson Bennett wasn't. So seemingly now there's reason to believe that Daniels is healthy. I have no idea what's happening at practice right now, but seemingly Daniels is healthy. can Smart really get away with not even acknowledging the elephant in the room on that? Because that's what he's kind of done before. Can he get away with that more now?
I mean, I think what he's going to do probably is find the game plan that prepares himself and the best chance to win the semifinal when you don't have a team like Alabama with a playmakers galore on their offense that you have to keep pace with no matter how good you think your defense is. We found out today on its not-so-best day, it's still not very good against Alabama. I think – I don't want to hear the words open competition. Do you want to hear that, Brandon? Do you want to hear that there's an open competition? Does that solve it for everybody out there?
Well, it's just a lie. Here's the thing about it. People got to understand this, that you can't have an open competition during practice because there's not enough practice reps to go around. You got to give the 1 reps to somebody so that they can get ready to play the game. Now, you got a couple of weeks here, I guess, because you don't play until December 31st. And this is where Smart gets himself in trouble because he's tried to pretend before that it's an open competition every week. You can't do that. It's just physically not possible to have an open competition at quarterback because when it's all said and done, you're only getting a quarterback halfway ready as you could. So in the past, when Smart said that, it's an open competition between, like, say, Fromm and Fields. No, it really was. Because if you were splitting your number 1 reps and then trying to play that guy the next week, fully during the game, he's only half as ready to play as he could be. So they've sort of got to make a decision about which quarterback they're going to get ready, whether they think that you just can't have an open competition during practice because it's not July, it's December, and you're about to play a game, you hope, in the college football playoff coming up.
I mean, I think the game you change a position like that, especially when a guy's 12-0, you change a position like that in the midst of a game, not in the midst of practice. I'm going to use my eyes and share with you guys what my eyes saw. Brendan, do you think it would have been fair after the pick 6 for Georgia to have tried a JT Daniels out there? I didn't see him warming up. I didn't see him with a helmet on. I saw JT Daniels doing a lot of encouraging. I saw after the first interception that Stetson threw, JT Daniels goes over to him and they talk about it. Here's what I saw. Here's what you did. Stetson Bennett nods. I think that's the point where I don't know whether there was a frustration, critical mass point was, you got to look at this 2 ways. Was it's stubbornness to make a change, or they just really don't feel like he gives them any better chance to win the football game.
Don Wynn says on the comment section that it's JT has no fair chance of playing. I don't know that you're wrong for saying that. I can't guarantee you they fairly evaluated JT Daniels. You may be right about that. Maybe they truly weren't fair to JT Daniels. I'll go back to what Brad Nessler said on Thursday, that from his perspective, that he thinks that Daniels may have missed his chance by not being ready at the right time. That they needed him to practice, wasn't able to do it. At that point in time, they just hitched their wagon to Stetson Bennett, and they didn't want to look back after that. You say that's not fair. There's a chance that's true. I can't tell you that it was fair how it was handled. The only thing I'm going to say is there was a reason they did it. Maybe it was the wrong reason. Maybe it was a bad reason. And maybe it truly was unfair, but they did it for a reason.
Yeah. I mean, I'm trying to simplify things a lot, Brandon. And to me, with these stacking games against Alabama, I just wonder truly if the Georgia faithful should ever think they're going to beat Alabama if they can't answer these 2 questions. A, we have a better defense than Alabama, and B, we have a better quarterback than Alabama. What do you feel about that?
Say that again. I'm sorry. I'm reading this.
I know. So the next time, or however many more times Georgia's going to play Alabama, I've got 2 simple litmus tests. A, does Georgia have a better defense than Alabama? You get that one checked? Does Georgia have a better quarterback than Alabama? If Georgia can say those 2 things, that's the next time they should ever feel high and mighty coming into one of these games again.
Yeah, maybe so. I don't know. You just never know how it's going to go until you get on the field, I guess, because, I think they thought they certainly had the better defense tonight. Quarterback, I think most people expected the Bama quarterback to win that individual battle, but I think they expected a lot more from the Georgia defense than what they got. All right, our producer, Michael Carvel, has given us the transcript of exactly what Kirby Smart said about the quarterback situation tonight. So he was asked about, I guess the question is, okay, all right, so here's the question. I actually have the question and the answer. I don't know which media person asked it, so I'll just read it. Kirby, I understand Alabama scored 41 points tonight, but there's always a debate about the quarterback situation. Is there going to be a debate about who should start in the playoffs? Can you just sort of address that and whether you think you have a decision to make about who starts in the playoffs? This is Kirby Smart's answer. We have a decision to make every week at every position. But I have the utmost confidence in Stetson Bennett. I think he did some really nice things tonight. We go and reevaluate everything all the time, but he played well. It's a tough environment. We put him in defensively and didn't. We have to be able to run the ball and have a little bit of semblance of balance. And I feel like there was times tonight where we were getting into a scoring contest because our defense didn't get stops, and you don't want to do that. But I certainly have a lot of confidence in Stetson. I have a lot of confidence in JT too. I hate that answer, y'all. I mean, I hate that answer. That's the same kind of paint-by-numbers answer that Smart's given on this in the past. And obviously, if there's a reason that he doesn't want to play JT Daniels, he's not going to come out and trash him in a press conference. I realize that. But to those of you that want more from Smart on this, I kind of understand. I think one of the things that makes me different than some of y'all is I'm open to the possibility that there's a justifiable reason that Daniels isn't playing. But I do wish Smart would do more to explain that. An answer like this, in this particular situation, is just simply not good enough for me. That's a little too passive for, what Georgia's facing right now, a day in which you really got embarrassed on a national stage. This notion there's a decision to make at every position each and every week. As I said before, that veers away from what I think the actual truth really is that you're getting a quarterback ready to play. That's the reason why Benson's been playing and Daniels hasn't been playing at all, because that's the quarterback they've been getting ready to play. It's almost like I don't know how you get a better answer out of Smart than that. I truly don't. There's nothing wrong with that question, but that answer is going to be, for a lot of Georgia fans, leave it lacking.
So my interpretation of that answer, I'd love to hear what you think, Brandon, is he still feels like Stetson Bennett gives Georgia the best chance to win coming into this game, throughout this game, and coming out of this game. Does he have to say Stetson Bennett is the quarterback we feel still gives us the best chance to win, period? Is that what he needs to say? Or does he need to say this is why, X, Y, and Z, which would really throw the covers back on some lot of bad bugs, and he would never want to reveal a lot of these things publicly?
So I guess if I was going to phrase a question to Kirby, it might be this. You named JT Daniels as the start at the beginning of the season. At some point in time, you changed your mind. Why'd you change your mind? And he may say, well, he was injured. Well, now he's healthy now. The issue is not why Bennett's playing over Daniels. To me, the issue is why JT Daniels isn't playing. Or, regardless of what Smart says there, it's fairly obvious he's not even a consideration to play. And that's the part where people get frustrated. The actual text of Kirby Smart's answer there just doesn't ring true for a lot of people. That Smart acts like he's a constant consideration to play. But I told you before, the guy that talked to Daniels' parents before the Tennessee game was led to believe that Daniels' camp thought he was playing that day, and he didn't. So, apparently Daniels truly isn't a consideration to play as maybe much as Smart's maybe letting on with that answer. And that's why that's going to be lacking for a lot of people.
Raise your hand out there, Dog Nation. Who feels the next time Georgia faces Alabama, if they're lucky enough and if they advance to face Alabama again in the National College Football Playoffs, who thinks this is going to be a scoring contest again? I don't think the answer is more from run game, more from balance. Sooner or later, it's going to be Alabama's operating at peak efficiency. You're going to get 3 or 4 stops in a big game because you have a the best defense in the country. It's just the way college football is played right now, where when Alabama's cooking, you've got to match those things offensively.
Jay Parker says Kirby Smart thinks he'll lose the locker room. I can't confirm that's true, but there's certainly a chance that might be true. Based on what Nolan Smith said out at the Florida game, you get a lot of reason to think there are a lot of these players that really like Stetson Bennett, and maybe they're wrong for feeling that way. I can't confirm that Smart thinks that he'll lose the locker room if he were to make that quarterback switch, that the majority of the players on the team prefer Stetson Bennett, but I guess I'd be open to that as I would be anything else. Lights shining in my eyes, and Dogs J24 says, tell me this, do you think Nick would have made a change? But I told you this before. In 2017, Nick Saban went the entire season playing the inferior quarterback. On that Alabama roster in 2017, we had people who were seeing Alabama practice saying that from August on, Tua Tagovailoa was the better of the two quarterbacks. So he almost went an entire season without playing the better of the two quarterbacks. So I guess even Nick Saban is somewhat at issue with this. And by the way, Mac Jones, who's starting and doing a pretty good job of the New England Patriots, was buried on the Patriots roster for a while. So, I mean, I guess, no one's perfect.
Yeah, buried on the Bama roster.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Sometimes it's very hard. Sometimes, people can make the argument that maybe Nick Saban had the wrong quarterback all along, but he had 3 really good ones.
Dante Green says we have more chance at this against Alabama rather for Kirby. He says basically throw the kitchen sink as opposed to the conservative approach. I didn't think Georgia was too conservative. I mean, I didn't think Georgia was conservative tonight. I don't know what the run pass ratio is going to end up being, but I mean, unless I'm wrong, Georgia threw it more than they ran it tonight, didn't they? And that was true at the beginning of the game, wasn't it? Can you pull up the stats?
Yeah,
so Dante, I get what you're saying. And as far as like the pass rush stuff, I don't know. I think they were trying to rush the passer, and they were just failing. But I don't know that being aggressive. I mean, think about first half when there was that Bama punt. They're back down their own goal right there. You know, they came out throwing right there. They got a first down. I forget how the drive concluded, but even back down there in their own goal at the beginning of the game, they were throwing the ball right there. So I don't necessarily think the issue for Georgia tonight was not being aggressive enough. Just the aggressive stuff they tried just didn't work well enough.
You're going to shake your head a lot when I roll these stats off, right?
All right.
Stetson Bennett, 29 out of 48, 2 interceptions, 340 yards, 3 touchdown passes. Georgia ran the ball 30 times for 109 yards, and they threw the ball 48 times for 340 yards. Brock Bowers has 10 catches for 139 yards. Pickens has 2 for 41. He was targeted 5 times. Folks, Brock Bowers was targeted 16 times. 16 times.
Yeah, I mean, for a while, Brock Bowers was the entirety of the Georgia offense, I think. All right, let me go back over to Facebook, and we're going to wrap up here a little bit because these comments are just kind of getting a little bit repetitive. And listen, I get people in a bad mood. I get that. And, I'm sorry I'm not reciting the mantra exactly as some of y'all want to hear it. I get all of that.
Bama found a way to have 115 yards rushing against Georgia tonight on 26 carries.
That's tough.
Most would not have thought that was happening. Remember, LSU, they had 6 yards rushing against LSU.
R.J. Rain says Kirby needs to stop trying to control the clock and just play ball. Once again, I don't know that's necessarily what Kirby did tonight. There were a couple times in the, when they were down 2 scores where I kind of wanted him to control the clock a little bit more because I was hoping to keep that Alabama offense off the field a little bit more.
They needed to have a turnover. With the way this game plan was going, Georgia needed to have a turnover, and they didn't get it.
Darius Swain says, nice to see Darius checking in on the show. Darius, thanks for being with us. That the announcers even said that when Georgia brings the linebackers, that's when the issues start for the opposing offense.
So Georgia had 16. This is a better example, Brandon. When it was a game at the half, Stetson was 11 out of 16. No interceptions and 168 yards at the half. Georgia on the ground had 14 carries. So they were balanced in the first half. The big thing, folks, I know we got a lot of math folks out there, but Georgia had to throw it 32 times and a half. Not the way you're going to win this game.
Marcus Chavin said Bama did an amazing job at picking up blitzes, an even better job in special teams to pin us deep. We had a full field of travel all night. I agree with almost everything that Marcus says there. Bama does not give you extra yards on special teams. A lot of folks made a big deal about Jamison Williams playing special teams last week because it led to the targeting penalty, and yet he had a huge special teams tackle tonight, at least one. That's just kind of what they do, and I did think they picked up the blitz. They don't make it easy for you. You have to acknowledge that. Kevin Cook, thanks for being here. Appreciate the kind words. Don Wynn, also on the subject of Brock Bowers. I think that he could go down as one of the great offensive weapons that Georgia's had in the modern era. I mean, think about, at least 2 more years of him in a Georgia uniform. What you think is 2 more years of him in a Georgia uniform, that's terrific. And, I mean, he's really terrific. Shelton Tucker says no ground game. I kind of agree with Shelton on that, and the world's coming to an end if I'm saying that. I kid with Shelton. But the issue for Georgia was they really couldn't run. And I said this going into the show when we were at Marlowe's Tavern on Thursday night that, the one area in which I would say that Georgia's clearly inferior to what it was in 2017, 2018 is when you had that great tandem of running backs like you had back then. I don't think this group is quite what that was. And, by Friday, I was kind of feeling a bit better about that. But that really kind of showed up today that, this was not a great rushing attack that Georgia put on display. They're going to want to run the ball some. And I think tonight it seems like that just didn't hold up for them well enough.
Yeah, you tried thinking, okay, they got a lot with Kenny McIntosh here. Zamir I think he was effective when he was running the ball inside the tackles. It was very hard for them to tackle him. Did you see where they got him out wide as a receiver tonight in the second half, and they threw a ball out there. A couple of times, I'm going to say, I saw Ladd McConkey running, Jermaine Burton running free all by themselves, kind of the way sometimes Bama got schemed up, and they were always getting their guys open in space as well.
Ellis McGee on some of the Bennett decision-making. Yeah, that's my biggest issue with him tonight was just bad decisions at the wrong time. There's no doubt that's true. And Wade Walford said our defense will never get a championship playing like they did today. Yeah, you got to play better. And listen, I think you could still be very happy you have this Georgia defense come college football playoff, but it's going to be about just getting more stops they had tonight. I mean, a couple of more stops could have made this game feel a little bit different, and that's just what it is. My prediction going into the week was something in the neighborhood of 30-23 or 30-21, for Georgia here in this game. I think when you play the biggest games you're going to play, the expectation is you should score 30 to win. And I think it's fair to ask Georgia to hold an opponent like this below 30. And that's kind of to me, that's kind of the line of demarcation. I think if you get into a game that's like 50-45 or something like that, who knows what happens in a situation like that. That's not really a very dependable recipe for success. But if you can dependably score 30, and if you believe you can hold that other team below 30, that's a lot of what the NFL is now. It's a race to 30, and you're just trying to keep the other team from getting there. And that, to me, is what the big game's going to look like for Georgia in that same spot there, too. Georgia's got to find a way to get its 30, and it's got to find a way to keep that opponent, like a team like Alabama, from doing that. Tonight, it was struggling in both accounts on that.
There's no way anybody's going to convince me if Georgia plays this Alabama team again that they're going to hold them under 24 points. I just don't think it's possible.
Well, then they might as well not go to the playoff. I mean, people act like there aren't wildly different outcomes from week to week in college football. It's not likely, but I mean, what, we going to hide under the bed and just not go to Miami or go to Indianapolis wherever the game takes place?
Well, I mean, I just think that's the way Georgia wins this game is it's something like 38-31, 38-35, and it's an invigorated effort on both sides of the ball, and they find some more playmakers and variety in their offense. They definitely don't need to be throwing the ball 32 times and a half against. And most people could point out that Georgia's offense was deep shots today, screen passes, and then trying to find Brock Bowers open and isolated against the safety, where he won those battles almost all the time.
I'll remind you, it's our Dog Nation postgame show presented by the UGA Bookstore. Of course, you can check them out online, UGAbookstore.com. All the great apparel, Peter Millar, Vineyard Vines, Tommy Bahama, all the great-looking stuff. You can shop for it online, UGAbookstore.com. Stop by and see them right next to the Tate Sunit Center, right across from Sanford Stadium. You can check that out there. It's a great way to look great for what we hope is an eventual college football playoff berth for Georgia. And, of course, a great way to get stocked up for all the holiday gifts you need to buy. Find that there at UGAbookstore.com. Lottie Lauderdale brings up the possibility that Georgia could be left out of the college football playoff. This really comes down to a Georgia-Notre Dame comparison.
Wow. That would just be show upon shows, would it not?
Well, and so we talked about this a little earlier. I want to circle back to this right now. It's really a Georgia-Notre Dame comparison right now. In the case of Georgia, it's 12-1. In the case of Notre Dame, it's 11-1. The issue I think you're going to have, and why I would feel confident that Georgia certainly has the preponderance of evidence on its side. Georgia has 3 wins right now against the current college football playoff top 25. Notre Dame, I believe, doesn't have any. Obviously lost its high-profile game against Cincinnati. The committee has come out and said that the hiring of Marcus Freeman as head coach removes any concern they had about the absence of coach, something that Gary Barta, the playoff selection committee chairman, said this past Tuesday they would consider with Notre Dame. Apparently that's now not an issue anymore. My expectation is I am going to be curious to see if there's any developing narrative around Notre Dame whatsoever. Why do we want to see this Georgia team play again? If there's any kind of national narrative around that at all. But you can't even really hit Georgia with do you really want to put a team in the playoff that lost its last game? If you're going to do that in favor of Notre Dame, that's a team that also made the playoff last year after losing its most recent game in the ACC title game. So you just don't have a lot of ways to argue against Georgia being in the playoff here. I don't take these numbers very seriously, but the ESPN playoff predictor, their metric thing, gave Georgia a 99% chance of making the playoff going in to Saturday's game. It obviously would have become 100% had Georgia won. So, notwithstanding the result, ESPN already had Georgia as a 99% chance of making the playoff. Those numbers don't mean much to me, but it's at least, I guess, worth mentioning here in this conversation. I'll also tell you this. We'll get ready to do our final comments. I'm not going to insult your intelligence by giving you a Marco's moment of the game tonight. There was no Marco's moment, but that doesn't mean that Marco's Pizza still doesn't taste great for you, and great savings too. So go to Marcos.com, go to the Marcos app, and you can enjoy some really good pizza here this weekend. Some pizza tastes pretty good to me right now and would certainly help me feel better about what was not a great night for Georgia Bulldogs fans. You can get a large one-topping pizza right now for $9.99. That's certainly great savings, so make sure you check that out online, Marcos.com, or the Marcos app, and you can do that here today.
Here's a Kirby Smart comment about the defensive performance. He says, I really feel good about the things we worked on, but our ability to execute them, we had 2 or 3 third downs where we have had a bust and cut a guy loose. And we haven't done that all year. When you're in man coverage and you cut a guy loose, that's not typical of us. Now, they beat you. They beat us on several man coverages, and I can take that. But when you cut a guy loose, you can't do that. He's talking about a missed assignments and a guy lets him pass off. When you get these guys in third down, you've got to get off the field. Nakobe Dean was like, we prepared for this like every other week. We took it in stride, tried to trust the coaches, tried to trust the plan and everything. They've got great players, and they made great plays. We just didn't play our best game today. Other comment Nakobe said was, we got a lot of work to do, a lot to work on. I'm pretty sure we're going to continue to work.
So there you go. So a little too casual for my taste. I don't mind telling you that. I think Kirby's a great coach, but that's not a great press conference. And when he talks about typical for our defense, unfortunately in big games against great offenses, that performance is actually a bit more typical for this Georgia defense than maybe he wants to let on there. They've been fairly commonly exposed against high-profile, high-explosive offenses going back now 3-4 years. So I think at a certain point in time you got to own what your defense does against the best offenses that you face and not kicking around a bunch of 6-6 teams like a bully.
I think there's some truth into what you're saying there, Brandon. I think Georgia has to reach the point as a program where they can't rely on its defense to win these games. They have to get to a point where their offense is going to trade blows, and then the defense can snuff it out late.
But you can't overthink this. You still want to have the best defense in the country. You still want to have the best defense. They didn't play like it tonight. But this idea, like you don't want to be pillow soft beta Ohio State. You don't want to do that. They got shoved. I mean, we act like the only kind of college football game that's been played this year is this game here. But there's all kinds of data points all over the place where physicality, running the ball, playing defense was clearly – that's the reason why Michigan's going to the playoff and Ohio State's not, because Ohio State's too soft. And so let's not act like the only evidence we have for what works in college football is what happened behind us here tonight.
My recipe is for the way you beat this specific Alabama, which is the litmus Georgia has to get through when maybe a lot of other programs in the country do not, is you've got to find a way where the defense does not have to have an amazing game to beat Alabama.
30-23.
You've got to find a way to do that.
We got to win 30-something to 20-something. That to me is about what it is. Now I've lost my Facebook comments, which I guess is a sign we need. But there we go. We got to get off the air. Matt Rukavina says we're in the playoff. I don't care about that. I care about the fact that we made an average Alabama team look like world beaters. Certainly fair enough for right now. Yeah, I certainly showed up tonight knowing that people weren't quite ready for a whole bunch of playoff talk as of yet. Armand Rashad says that LSU exposed everybody that year, BA. We just didn't have the firepower to keep up. That's true. But here's the one thing that's also true, although people don't want to probably live in this world tonight. Even with a quarterback right now that most of you are critical of, and I understand why you are critical, this is still a Georgia offense that's way better in 2021 than it was 2019. That offense averaged like 21 points per game in SEC play. This team is averaging, right at 40. So part of the story for Georgia is how much better it's gotten offensively since it didn't have enough firepower to keep up with LSU back then. Still not the very best offense in the country, but it's taken big steps. And I'm not giving out participation trophies. I'm just telling you what's true.
Question here that was sent to Stetson Bennett. Stetson, you referenced a couple of picks he threw, and there was another one in the first half that was pretty close. I'm just wondering if you felt off at all tonight, or was it just a couple of mistakes, basically? Stetson says, no, I felt fine. The first one was a bad decision. The second one, I didn't see the safety driving. Like I said, you can't have those two plays against players like this. They made us pay for it.
There you go. I'm not really – I don't know that means a whole lot, to me. I'm not really sure what he's supposed to say right there. Gary Park says we need the horses to beat Alabama. We don't have them yet. Yeah, I don't know. Adam Cummings feeling better now, saying we're going to beat Michigan, then beat Bama for the national title. All will be great. Maybe that's the way it all works out. Maybe it goes down just like that. Wesley Mullen says, "Call a spade a spade." Wesley, what spade am I not calling a spade? I don't know what spade I'm not calling a spade. Demetrius Lee, and here I'm feeling pretty good as an Alabama fan. Greg Rosenberg says Monken's an elite offensive coordinator. He needs an elite quarterback. I think the next couple of weeks are going to be very interesting, just to hear what is said about this, if anything. Positive Vibes wants Kirby to own it more for the lack of quarterback development. I definitely think more thorough, easy to understand answers would serve Kirby well here. I do think that's true. Anything else that's not the same thing over and over again? Apparently not. Apparently not. Dark Horse 1 says it's my fault that Georgia lost. Listen, I'll take that. I honestly don't care. I'm fine with whatever.
Didn't see you running with Jamison Williams out there, Brandon.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think that would have turned out too well. All right. Let me see. Facebook's absolutely just one spam comment after another, the same thing over and over again. Let me see what else. Chastain Coleman talking about Devontae Wyatt. Did you see anything from Wyatt? They're saying that he appeared to be a little banged up there at the end.
Yeah, there were. First of all, Devontae had a pretty good game, especially that play he made chasing down Bryce Young to force that fumble. Just one that Georgia needed to go its way right there. As far as Devontae, I did not see a major injury for him that would be something that wouldn't impact Georgia in the semifinal.
Hugh Nash says I'm not reading his comments. Hugh, I'm sorry about that. Hugh, repost your comment if I didn't see it. I apologize. Trying to stay up to date on all these different comment sections. Also, a few folks were mentioning the Dan Lanning thing.
What's the Lanning thing?
Well, just the fact that he's been rumored, be involved in the Oklahoma job. I don't know if there's anything new on that right now. I guess my assumption's kind of always been that eventually that job was going to veer in the direction of some other folks. But obviously, Georgia fans have been paying attention to the fact that Lanning's name's shown up there. For what it's worth, Todd Monken's name's also been rumored to be connected to Duke there as well. So I would say over the course of the next couple of weeks, there's also going to be a lot of chatter involving UGA assistants, perhaps even some position coaches who could get a chance to look at some new opportunities as well.
Wow.
I mean, you got to understand something. When you got head coaches now, racking up $10 million a year salaries, are going to be big raises to be had for some assistant coaches, and some of them may be willing to jump in order to take advantage of some of that money too. So you can't be sure you won't be dealing with some of that as well.
Lots of things going on back and forth. Everybody. I mean, what do we expect this show to be like? This is
exactly what it's been like. A total horror show.
We're not going to sit there and there's no glimmer of hope like there was a fumble there or there was a key play. This is one where Georgia's reputation as the best team in the land, the best defensive team in the land, a generational defensive team got exposed.
Yeah. I mean, listen, it was an awful night. It was just an absolutely terribly awful night.
I mean, everybody thought that this game and the walk to January the 10th was going to be a coronation march to something really special. Now it's the same thing. You've got to find a way to beat Alabama.
All right, last comments. We'll go to dognation.com. I feel like I haven't been there in a little bit. And so for Hugh and some others who said I wasn't reading their comments, I apologize. I've been trying to go back and forth and get what I can, so I apologize for that. Diane J checks in to say that the game would have been different if we had an elite quarterback who put up points like Alabama. It's not all on the defense, so there's that. Jermaine King on the subject of Latavius Brini. He was not in the game at the beginning of the game. Did Brini ever come in? The honest truth is I don't know. But at the beginning of the game, William Poole wasn't in that star spot, and I at one point in time I left the press box. I went and sat in the stands. To be completely honest with you, I was on pins and needles all night. And
you went and sat in the stands, really?
Yeah, I went and sat in the stands for a while, and
How'd that go for you?
It's fine. I mean, well, the game wasn't going any better, but I just would rather be in a spot where, I can kind of relax, be myself a little bit more. Because, listen, I'm a fan. I want Georgia to win these games. And I'm disappointed like crazy when they don't. So, I went down there and tried to sit with the people for a little bit and see if I could change up the energy, change up the vibe. And so once I did that, there were probably a couple of things I missed. But so I can't confirm if Brainy played or not. He definitely did not start, though.
Saw a lot of pool, saw more pool tonight in a big game, in a clutch game than we saw all year. That's one of those things I will have to peruse the post-game press conference about that to learn the status. You did see where Jamari Salyer try to give some updates here. Jamari Salyer started the game. It looked like he left the game hobbling off. Will Anderson got a sack on that play. I didn't know if he was manned up against Mari or not, against Jamari Salyer or not on that play. You saw Chris Smith try to give it a go, and Chris Smith was the guy. It looked like it was the guy that got cut loose, like Kirby said. He was the guy that was trying to track down the Crimson Comet, which was Jamison Williams tonight on that big 80-yard screen.
Andrew, thanks for the kind words. I appreciate that. Here's Hugh Nash over at DogNation.com. So I want to make sure I read Hugh's comment. He says, and by the way, Savvy Hugh knows how to go to the right comment section so I can find him here. He says, we abandoned the run and our zone defense wasn't effective in the first half. We didn't get to him with limited rushers. And our zone coverage broke down. It wasn't until the second half when we started doing more exotic blitzes with multiple linebackers that was more effective. That may be true. And you may very well be right. I would be curious to hear if they do feel like there's something they could have, done differently there in that regard. I mean, it definitely seemed like they were taking advantage of that of the zone that Georgia was playing. I mean, I saw that myself. I won't pretend to be smart enough to know what they should have done differently, but it definitely seemed like they were exploring that. But there's a reason they're playing that coverage and not playing as much press man stuff like that, because when it comes to guys like Alabama's facing tonight, they don't think they can run with them.
Yeah, Kirby mentioned that a lot in his press conference about man coverage, Brandon. I think one of the things that people don't like about this defensive performance is they couldn't get home to the quarterback at all.
That's the issue.
And, I think everybody would have taken those Jamison chunk plays and those explosives. Remember how we thought Georgia was the 40 sacks? They were different. I think the biggest letdown, I guess a little bit, is how Georgia, and maybe it's just Bryce Young being special the way Tua was, being special the way Joe Burrow was, but they just couldn't get home. All that man coverage, all those busts would feel a little bit better if Georgia was getting to him a couple more times. I think that kind of simmers the frustration.
Yeah, the interior pass rush didn't work at all. They were trying to bring that pressure up the middle, and it just didn't work at all. We had a comment, I mentioned this before. They were spotting that. They had that spotted up, and that just wasn't impacting. That wasn't moving Young off a spot at all.
It'd be very, Alabama, Alabama has the chance now where they're going to be the hunted. They're going to be the team again. They're going to feel like the defending national champion. The way the Tide celebrated this victory tonight, it was something that they kind of, remember where they were against the Auburn man, the Tank Bigsby situation where the guy runs out of bounds? It seems like everything is going Alabama's way. Now, I don't mean officials, breaks, calls, or anything like that, but they have went from a valley in their season to where right now it feels like they're playing with house money.
CAS says, do you think we can beat Michigan? Of course I do. Now, that's like the least popular comment in this entire comment section. Like, literally no one wants to hear anything like that. Of course I think that Georgia can beat Michigan. Now, I can get not wanting to, turn the page too quickly on that, and you certainly don't want to use that as cover for needing to talk about what needs to be talked about tonight. But, of course Georgia can beat Michigan, of course. And, some of these people that are saying all this stuff tonight will pretend they didn't say half this stuff when Georgia does that. That's one of the reasons why I get frustrated at times, is because, I show up with my name next to my, words each and every time. There's an expectation and really an obligation that I be somewhat consistent. Some of these anonymous types can come on here and spew whatever they want to and then just go hide under bed for 2 weeks and see how the wind changes direction. They come back and pretend that was the way they felt all along. Georgia plays Michigan in the college football playoff, plays better in that spot. All of a sudden, the feeling's going to be a little bit different. But I can certainly understand why people aren't quite ready to get there just yet, even if that is completely true. So final comments here. Fizzy says, do you think we went into the game with the mindset of being undefeated? Listen, I mean, I trust this Georgia team's ability to handle pretty much any mindset, whether it be the mindset of, hey, staying on top, which they were coming into the game, or maybe getting back on top the way in which they're going to have to try to approach that now. I don't think Georgia beat itself. Yes, there were some bad decisions offensively that certainly added to this, but Alabama came out here today with the kind of winning game plan that beat Georgia. I don't think Georgia's mindset could do anything about it one thing or another. I don't know that you could have had a better mindset that could have made the result any different. Georgia just got outplayed, and sometimes it's just that. Georgia just got outplayed.
I think you said it perfectly. Georgia, you see the team and you watch the team, and you watch the team over the years. I thought this team was fired up. I thought this team was ready to take that next step and to really show that this was something special they had in this club, in this team. And it's the big bad wolf, Alabama, coming again at you. That's just simply what it is. It's Georgia, Alabama. It's just the nemesis.
Matthews 1 says, sorry, BA, Michigan runs a spread offense. I don't think we went after that performance. Well, you may be right, but I haven't certainly seen anything from Michigan's thus far this season that's going to make me afraid of them. But obviously, no matter who Georgia plays, it has to play better than it did this evening.
I mean, I'm sure most people would welcome Michigan again rather than catching Alabama again in the semifinals.
All right, so these are our absolute last comments. Rob D, not happy with the Georgia defense tonight. You can certainly understand that. Travis Joyner says we had 3 weeks to prep for this game. That's the sad thing, and I don't disagree with Travis on that. What should have been a huge advantage for Georgia, the fact that it played Charleston Southern, then Georgia Tech, whereas Alabama was forced to play. They were forced to play like win and you're in type football. They played Arkansas, remember, until the second to last week of the season. Alabama hadn't even clinched the SEC West yet. They had to beat Arkansas to do that, then had to go down to the wire multiple overtimes in the Iron Bowl. The fact that Georgia couldn't make Alabama look more tired and fatigued tonight, that's a huge disappointment. The commenter is absolutely right about that.
Yeah, Bama didn't seem like it seemed like they were better off for it, and it seemed like depth wasn't an issue when we thought maybe that would have been the case.
Let's see what else. Jay Parker says, why will it be any different in January, BA? I can't guarantee that it won't. Maybe the same thing again. Georgia may go to, if it's lucky enough to be in Indianapolis, it may go there and just get absolutely throttled again. Could very well happen. I certainly can't tell you that it won't. I can't see. These lights are shining my eyes. I can't see the comments. Xavier Mitchell says, what do we need to do to get Darnell more involved? He did catch a touchdown tonight. I mean, this is not quite – I mean, and the problem is like Darnell Washington's biggest issue is that Brock Bowers looks like one of the greatest tight ends of all time. That's kind of what Darnell's issue is. They threw him football. He got a touchdown tonight. But Alabama knew that Brock Bowers was going to get the ball every single time in the second half, and they still basically couldn't stop him. So that's the biggest issue facing Darnell right now is that Darnell's a part of this offense, and he's a very valuable weapon, including catching his first touchdown tonight. Brock Bowers is unlike almost anything that Georgia's ever had there at that spot. And that's kind of the issue there for now. Dustin Worley, I appreciate the kind words. That means a lot to me. M. McNeil says there is no excuse. Are you saying Auburn, Arkansas, LSU, Texas A&M have better personnel than Georgia?
Nope.
No, I mean, I'm not making an excuse. I'm just telling you what happened. Georgia got beat up. No excuse, but it did happen.
There's a thing in football, guys. I hope you understand this. Champions summon up their best when their best is required. Somehow Saban summons up the very best, and his football team's best, still better than Georgia. And, is there any solace in that? Does it make everybody feel a little bit better about all the gear in their house or how much passionately they follow this team and how much of their time and their emotion and their energy they invest in this program? No, it probably doesn't. But that's why this team has proven so hard to beat. I thought about this all when I was walking up here to join BA, and it's just Georgia is the anvil. I mean, Alabama is the anvil that breaks Georgia's season year after year after year. How do they beat Alabama? We've tried to do some chop-up autopsy. Again, the defense has to play an incredible game, and then they have to match the plays of Alabama's playmaking quarterback and overall offensive unit.
Hugh Nash also mentioned the idea that Georgia had abandoned the run tonight. Ironically, I think that's actually almost more true than the folks who thought Georgia's too conservative. If anything, it seemed like Georgia was, like I said, I go back and look at the play-by-play chart. Everything kind of runs together after a while. But it seems like there were some moments second half where maybe Georgia could have run it more than it did. Maybe they were just too afraid of the deficit. But if anything, I think Hugh's actually more right than some other folks on that.
Yeah. I mean, even Kirby mentioned it in his press conference. He said Georgia needed to find more balance. But again, I think Monken, you got to believe what Monken's dialing up there. I mean, really, a lot of those plays, Brandon, were extending handoffs in the screen game anyway.
Yeah. All right. Is anybody even still watching at this point? Anything else? Lottie Lauderdale says, who's my top four? I mean, I think Alabama probably goes number one, which moves Georgia probably to 3. Michigan may go to 2, especially since they're not, like, if they were beating Iowa 50-0, maybe they'd have an argument for number 1. But Alabama doing what it did may get them to 1, may get Michigan to 2. That's Georgia 3. That's Cincinnati 4. Alabama almost certainly chooses Dallas. It sounds like, based on what I was hearing, is that Alabama had the same thought that Georgia did about the Dallas thing, because a lot of Kirby's belief on this dates back to his time being at Alabama, that they would have liked to have gone somewhere other than notorious nightlife city like Miami. Players do have more free time. There's a huge difference between the national championship game and the bowl game, the semifinal game. You know, coaches always talk about, hey, this is a business trip. The college football playoff semifinal is not solely a business trip. There's a week's worth of activities out there. A lot of it is designed to have fun. Even in the days of the college football playoff, some of that's there. So players do have a decent amount of free time. Final couple of days, usually before the game, they kind of go on lock and kind of get into, you know, an area away from the entertainment districts and things like that. But you want to manage all that the best that you can. And I think that most of the coaches, if they had their choice, would prefer Dallas over Miami for that reason. I've certainly learned that over the course of the last couple of weeks. And now that's probably not going to be, it's certainly not Georgia's choice anymore. And they'll probably suffer from the fact that Alabama will take that Dallas game. They'll take the Group of 5 opponent. I believe that Alabama will probably throttle Cincinnati. I think anybody that played them would. And that kind of leaves you, in a battle against Michigan, a Michigan team that's been really very solid all season long. Obviously had the close loss to Michigan State. Got the, come-up win against their longtime nemesis, Ohio State. And obviously looks like if Georgia's lucky enough to be in that spot, and that's what I kind of think is going to happen, that certainly looks like a very big-time football game. 2 good-looking helmets side by side against each other. The storied Michigan program against a Georgia team that's trying to make it, another step towards a national championship.
Classic matchup. I think those two teams, Brandon, last met in the 60s, and you would have some really good Dan McGill stories. The great Georgia Bulldog, the late great Georgia Bulldog, historian, sports information director, tennis coach, and everything else like that. You're going to go a long way when you can find a Georgia opponent, and they haven't faced Michigan 60, 70 years.
Thomas T-Bone asking about what time we'll be on tomorrow. So I'm going to be on live for the playoff selection announcement. So if Georgia gets, left out, I'll be disappointed on camera again. Everybody can jump in here and get mad at me and blame me for whatever, too. We'll do all this again tomorrow. All this just absolute misery. We can do all this again tomorrow if Georgia gets left out of the playoff. I don't believe they will. It's obviously a little bit different show than I thought we'd be doing, because I'm guessing we'll have to spend half an hour or so trying to chop up more about what happened here. We'll kind of dive into some of what Kirby Smart said. And listen, I do wish he'd tell y'all what was going on. I do. I wish he'd be a little bit more open about this. If nothing else, because it would make my job easier if he'd be a little bit more forthright. This show's really kind of gone off the rails here, so let me just get it ready to go off the air. I've said that now 1,000 times.
Is this the part where you go good night and good evening? And
I need to. Yeah, I need to. Good night and good luck. DogNation.com last time. Caleb Janney says defense was poor, but difference maker quarterback is going to what gets them there. Change has to come. So there you go on that. Let me also give a shout out to some folks who had some kind words here a little earlier. Certainly appreciate that. Carl also says defensive line is too geared towards stopping the run. You have to get after the quarterback. Yeah. I mean, listen, one of the things that Georgia's done well all season long is they've changed personnel to fit what they thought other teams were going to do. Tonight it just didn't work. Grateful Dog, appreciate the kind words here on this. Thank you so much. All right. That's it. Thanks a lot. Hey, good comments. I know a lot of folks are frustrated. I get it. I know a lot of you want to see some things being done differently. I wish I could tell you why it's not happening. I don't know what to tell you, but that's the way it goes. I know it seems impossible to imagine this now, but there will be happier days. Georgia's going to be probably one of 4 teams tomorrow to get selected for the college football playoff. That's the kind of thing that makes it the envy of many in the college football world. And you can tell me that you don't care, and you can tell me you're not going to watch, and tell me all that kind of stuff. I know good and well that's not true, so sleep off whatever you got to sleep off tonight. Wake up tomorrow. We'll figure out where it all goes from here. Jeff, good stuff here.
Remember what we said at the beginning of the year? A successful season was Georgia making the college football playoffs, correct?
Yeah, but I'm not going to start giving out participation trophies just yet. But yes, that is indeed what we said. So that's all we're going to say for tonight. Thanks for being here for our Dog Nation post-game show. Maybe one of these days we'll do a happy show from the I guess we did do a victorious post-game show after the Peach Bowl last year, but that doesn't quite feel like the same thing. Wow. Maybe one of these days we'll do a happy show from Mercedes-Benz Stadium, but it ain't tonight. It ain't tonight for sure. Thanks for being here. Have a good night. We'll see you again next time.